Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? It is time. It's time for a new trial. I've been keeping this one a little bit close to the vest. Defense made a motion for a mistrial. Prosecutor was up to some fuckery. Potentially damaging evidence, no basis for it. The judge specifically said, do not ask that question. Do not use that as evidence. She walked right down the path and asked the question. It may be over on Tuesday morning. Batman Bruce Wayne bitch snitch. Gerald Brooks, your constitution does not apply to me because I'm a sovereign citizen, a traveler on the land. I'm the Hungarian Empire or whatever, bitch. Because they're so fucking absurd. If you want to be a sovereign citizen, just do yourself a favor first. Go to YouTube here and just get every sovereign citizen that's ever been before. Find me one that won. God dang, you're right. Don't go down this. It's not the path. Don't have time for stupidity. Some clever dick on the internet didn't find the great loophole in all of the world's law. Bitch snitch. God dang, you're right. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. God dang, you're right. Moorish Empire. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch. Moorish Empire. God dang, you're right. Traveler on the land. Bitch snitch. The late evening U.S. people.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. How are you doing? Hi, it's me, Legal Vices, right here on my little old channel I like to call Legal Vices, because that's how I roll. It is Maritime Monday this week. It might be the last Maritime Monday we have for a bit. Why? Because we got a trial upcoming, the Hannah Gutierrez Reed Rust shooting trial. It's supposed to be starting later this week. And also the Karen Reed trial is supposed to start on March 12th. So those are two trials that I plan on following gavel to gavel. So it might be a minute. We might get lucky a little bit somewhere along the way, but we'll keep the schedule open. Like I said, this, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow yet. Wednesday, we're probably going to be watching the Hannah Gutierrez Reed interrogation video, kind of revisiting that. Then Thursday, we should start with the trial. Hopefully we'll start with the trial. Otherwise, we'll do OJ. And then this Friday is F at Friday. We're going to do our F at Friday stream before the trial. So that should turn out really interesting. We're going to limit F at Friday to 4 hours. And then I'm supposed to do a trial stream right after that. So we'll just have to see how that goes. We're going to play everything by ear. But today on Maritime Monday, we're going to be talking about another Tugboat incident. If you remember, a while ago, we talked about the Tugboat 7 that sank in Branson, Missouri on a lake. This is another incident that happened before that. I believe that was 2018. This one is 2010. There's a lot of Tugboat accidents out there to choose from, peeps. A lot of them. Those things, as we're going to talk about today, a lot of those things, I mean, they just weren't meant to be around today. Hell, they weren't meant to be around by the end of World War II, but we're going to talk about that. And I guess if you're just joining us here, skip ahead a couple more minutes if you don't want to hear the chit chat, because this is me hanging out with my peeps and we're talking. So we got to have a little bit of back and forth here. We got to have a little bit of conversation before we get going into the heart of the subject. If you just want the meat and bones of it, skip ahead until you see a different video other than this mug. All right, let's start. So how are we doing so far? We've got Lowlands Angie. Thank you so much. Finally caught alive again. Lowlands Angie, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being a supporter for 4 months of the Clean and Sober crew. Thank you. And Little Miss, newest member. You are the newest member of the Bent Halos and Broken Wings. Wow. Thank you so much for that. You get a big foghorn for that. Where's the big foghorn? Uh-oh. Where's the big foghorn? There's a big foghorn. All right, thank you so much for joining the Bent Halos and Broken Wings tier membership. Speaking of memberships, either this weekend or next weekend, probably most likely next weekend, we'll be doing our February members only stream, even though it'll be in March. So, just work with me on that. All right. And we got another one. American Dreamer has been a member for 11 months. Why close up? Because it's a thing. We need to do that. Oh, I hear my dishwasher is done. I thought someone was at the door. I'm like, who in the hell's going to be at the door at 11 p.m.? Yeah, we're zoomed in a little bit today here. Why? Because we talked about it before. Not last weekend, the weekend before this past weekend was hell. My computer died on Saturday, but also at the same time my computer died. This studio chair that I normally sit in, that died because for like 4 weeks or so, I've been sitting on it at a weird angle because of my feet. I had to get my feet in a comfortable position while I survived tendonitis. And also the day before that, the Friday, my office chair died. But so I'm getting a new chair. It's a basic chair. It's like $100 chair, but I'm getting it sent from China because they didn't have any in stock here in Korea. So whilst I'm waiting for my new studio chair, I just brought in one of my big Chesterfields from the whiskey and cigar room. So this is my temporary chair here until the new chair arrives from China. Could be a week, could be a month. We'll just have to see how long it takes. And also, I'm zoomed in because when I show the video, then you get to see more of my handsome mug. And also, even before the show started, we had the first super chat of the day. The first super chat of the day. I have to scroll all the way up there and can I scroll that far up? Let's see if we can scroll all that way up and acknowledge our first super chat of the day. There it is. Swan Lake Lady. Here is a little something to help release the hounds. We are on our way. That's one thing. That's the like and subscribe poll today, peeps. That's it. So we unlocked the pig dog cam achievement at the $100 super chat mark. So the question today for the like and subscribe, hit the like button. Make sure you've hit it. Make sure you've liked the stream and subscribe if you haven't already done so. That would just make my little old heart sing with joy. If you would do me the favor of subscribing to the channel, costs nothing. You just reach down there and smack it. And if you are subscribed, or if you believe you are subscribed, just take an instant to look down and double check and make sure you're still subscribed. Because YouTube decided I didn't want about 50 of my subscribers over the weekend. They just do that, whatever. Just make sure you're not one of them that got nuked. Right. With that out of the way, take the like and subscribe poll. More pig dog cam? Yes. So I liked it? No, but I liked it anyway. And here, take my money. Gimme dogs. All right. Well, the first person is Swan Lake Lady. Swan Lake Lady, thank you so much for giving us a little something for the doggo cam. The pig dog cam will be here in $90. That's how you unlock it. Strawberries over here, just looking peaceful, waiting for her close up. And with that, we need to get into the show here because we got a lot to cover today. All right. A while ago, we talked about duck boat number 7 in Branson, Missouri. I said there's a lot of these. There's a lot of duck boat accidents to choose from. This one, well, the first one was there was a lot of problems with the duck boat. Today's case, there's less of a problem with the duck boat. It's more the other ship that ran over the duck boat. It's more their problem. But there's also a little bit of blame on the duck boat side of things. So let's bring up the video again. This is a video from our good friend Brick Immortar. I didn't put the link in the video yet, but I should in the video description. I'll do that after we finish here. Brick Immortar, great, solid guy. He's been on the channel. You know, I use his videos a lot because he is damn good at what he does. So get on over to Brick Immortar, subscribe to him, like everything he's ever done. Some great maritime stuff and some great other big structural things going wrong. You know, department store collapses, bridge collapses, things like that. Great guy. Look forward to having him on the channel again. He was on here last April. We need to have him on again. So, all right, Ted, again, we are using his because he's got a bunch of duck boat videos. He's a duck boat guy. So let's bring up the duck boat video that we need today. Where are we at? The ramming of duck boat 34. This is the ramming of duck boat 30. Oh, I haven't liked it yet. There we go. Boop. Now we've liked it. Everybody, make sure you go there and like this too, and just let them know that Legal Vices sent you. As always, well, I'll put the link up in the description after for anybody that's watching this on the replay. And let's embiggen it. Shuffle around a couple of windows, and we're going to hit the ground running. And again, he is so good at what he does that there's not a lot for me to comment during his video, and it's kind of a long video. So I'm going to be watching this a lot with you and commenting as little as possible because it's just a fantastic video. So let's watch it together.
To the northbound tug.
Oh, yeah, this is the Here's the recording of the Mayday, and as you're going to be able to see, this is the duck boat in question here, and this barge that's coming into view to the left, that's the one that's not going to see the duck boat.
To the northbound tug in front of Penn's Landing. This is Duck 34. I am at anchor. I am unable to maneuver. I am broken down. Over.
Now you're clearly hearing this duck boat right here radio to this barge, and well, the tug that's pushing the barge. You clearly hear him saying, "I am at anchor." He's incapacitated. I am at anchor. I am unable to maneuver. He's telling the tug to look out. I'm right in front of you, and I can't do a damn thing to get out of your way.
I am broken down. Over. The northbound barge in front of Penn's Landing. Please come back. The northbound tug.
Now this here is the actual video. This isn't AI like this. This is the actual video of the accident happening.
Hey, ferry, whoa.
Northbound barge at Penn's Landing, that tugboat is broken down. Northbound tug and barge going past Penn's Landing, this is Freedom. Coast Guard Sector Philadelphia, this is Freedom.
Vessel Freedom, this is Coast Guard Sector Delaware Bay, over.
Yes, sir, one of the tugboats off Penn's Landing just got, looks like they got run over by a barge and wanted to pick them up.
So there you have everybody that's there with a radio telling them to stay out of the way. Look out! There's a duck boat in front of you, and now we've got this other boat that heard it and saw it, and now he's like, "Oh my God! Now I've got to go out there. I'm going out there to do as much as I can to help."
Off Penn's Landing just got, looks like they got run over by a barge and wanted to pick them up.
Roger, Captain. How many persons are in the water, over?
No idea. I'm trying to talk to you right now. I'm going to get to me.
I'll talk to you later.
Pon. Hello, all stations.
Okay, now we've talked about this before. There's different alerts that you should make in emergency situations. Like pon is that's the international like urgent signals, not an emergency. It's an urgency signal that that somebody needs help. The situation is urgent, but for the time being, there's not an imminent danger of loss of life or the vessel. You sort of it's a standby kind of thing. And you always repeat it 3 times, like pon, like he did, just to make sure nobody mishears and nobody can say, oh, I didn't hear it. So anybody on radio is going to be hearing that. And Mayday, when you hear Mayday, 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 that means every ship within listening ability, any ship that hears a Mayday is duty bound to drop whatever they're doing and immediately head towards the source of the Mayday and begin search and rescue operations. So the pon is standby and Mayday is go for it.
This is United States Coast Guard, Sector Delaware Bay. United States Coast Guard, Delaware Bay. At 1437 local time, the Coast Guard received a report of 30 people in the water off of Penn's Landing in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All vessels in the area are requested to keep a sharp lookout, assist if possible, and report all sightings to the United States Coast Guard.
All of the awesome Brick Immortar supporters for this video. I don't know why that didn't go straight to a Mayday, unless it's just because they hadn't determined if it had actually happened yet. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
In the tragedy aboard Stretch Duck 7, we saw just how normalized the neglect of safety, maintenance, and modifications became in the world of Ride the Ducks tour boats.
Yep.
And while I did cover extensively several incidents leading up to the Duck 7's case, I was this close to keeping the mention of Duck 34's incident in that video, but I just couldn't. As I read further into it, Ride the Ducks Philadelphia's maintenance issues take a back seat to the outright negligence in seafaring and maritime operation that day, especially aboard the Tugboat Caribbean Sea.
And when we get through the video here, I'm going to read through part of this NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board findings on this case. We'll read through some of that together.
Extent aboard Duck 34 as well. As for the modified Army Duck tour boats, to summarize, for those who haven't seen the backstory.
Yeah, again, this is insane. Listen to this is absolutely true. And he talked about it in depth, and we also talked about it during the Duckboat 7 video we did. This is in Philadelphia, basically. Island.
Links will be in description for those who'd like to get caught up later. These vessels were purpose-built for World War II amphibious operations and intended to have a lifespan of only a few months.
Isn't that wild? These were just literally temporary amphibious assault vehicles for World War II. World War II, 70 years ago, 60 years ago at the time of the accident. And these boats weren't supposed to last 60 years. They were supposed to last a few months. But here we are 60 years later, and people are still giving tours on them.
Once World War II was over, they were quickly sold off as surplus by the thousands. And since they were already a handful to operate and maintain, even by those trained specifically in their use as military vehicles, it required that much more effort to keep them going in the civilian sector. Some received this treatment, many others didn't. And unfortunately, even many of those that didn't went on to be used as commercial passenger tour vessels. Another issue we can learn from, especially as a follow-up to what we know already about duck tours, if you've seen the previous videos, is to always keep an open mind and follow the facts.
Mm-hmm.
With everything we know about all the safety issues Ride the Ducks amphibians had over the years, much of which due to negligence, it would be easy to just put Duck 34's incident right in that same box, case closed. But as with anything I bring up in regards to safety, it's important to do the proper diligence before jumping to conclusions.
Okay, Daily Quick Buy says, notice how low the freeboard is. That's the distance between the surface of the water and the top of the deck. That was the loaded freeboard. The ballast condition, the unloaded freeboard, is much, much higher. I'll talk about that in a minute.
Hirsch and Family Entertainment had been the sole owner of Ride the Ducks International since 2004. The Philadelphia location one of 6 as of summer 2010. Branson, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle, Stone Mountain Park, Georgia, Newport, Kentucky. The Ride the Ducks brand had been around since 1977, so founded in 2003, Philadelphia's operation was relatively new on the scene. As with other Ride the Ducks locations, they made use of the same vessels, modified to the same standards as the rest of the company. Ride the Ducks International would modify the former World War II Army Duck amphibious transports to varying degrees. All vessels would get their power plants replaced and would add the generally similar canopies, rear boarding ladders, and operator and passenger seating arrangements.
So now this is the interesting thing. They talk about they all get these new canopies. If you saw the Tugboat 7 Branson sinking case, the canopy that they put on there was one of the reasons why so many people died. They couldn't get out because of the way the canopies were installed. But they do have new engines, but also what they do, and he talks about this very, very briefly, but they would take this already old, not the greatest condition vessel anyway, and they would lengthen it. They would add stuff to it to make it longer so it could carry more people, which if you're not careful can really, really screw with stability. But that's not an issue really in this case, so no need to talk about it in detail.
But for various reasons, Ride the Ducks created different variations in how they'd stretch the ducks to allow for this increased passenger capacity. Most commonly, they were lengthened to carry the additional passengers, and many were not otherwise built up or reinforced, though, referred to as a stretch duck. Others received more robust bows, additions to their width and gunnel height, allowing for more freeboard and, it's thought, more reserve buoyancy, referred to as the master jig duck. The most glaring example of this difference being Duck 54's survival in the Branson incident, a master jig duck pushing through the exact same deadly conditions as Duck 7, a stretch duck, right alongside one another. Of the commercial amphibious vessels in the U.S., as of November 2010, the U.S. Coast Guard inspections show a large majority being World War II-era Army DUKWs, both stretched and not stretched. Duck 34 was of the stretch duck variety.
So that's the ones that they've actually added to and made it longer than it was.
While tank barges appear similar to the more common inland barges seen on U.S. waterways, they're on average much longer, wider, and have a very high profile compared to their simpler open-hull counterparts. Most inland bulk barges can be moved in groups on U.S. rivers of anywhere from 2 to 40 units at a time, pushed from the rear and referred to as a tow, while specialized barges with greater dimensions and mass require more specialized handling, and often in single-unit tows only, just the one barge and its tugboat. Purpose-built for the City of Philadelphia Water Department by Trinity Marine Group, Nashville, in 1989, the resource.
Okay, here we can see the loaded freeboard for the barge. This actually comes into play. The loaded freeboard is when it's full. There's 7.5 feet or 2.28 meters between the surface of the water and the top of the deck here. So from here up to here is 7.5 feet or 2.28 meters. The empty freeboard, when it's not laden with its cargo, it's 20 feet or 6.1 meters from the water to the top of the deck.
Source. A non-self-propelled sludge tank barge was 250.
So a non-self-propelled sludge barge. It means it doesn't have its own engine. It has to be pushed, pulled, hauled, whatever. It cannot operate under its own power. That's why there's a tug involved.
50 feet in length.
Oh, and it just hauls sludge. It's on a daily sludge run from a water recycling plant, I believe. So they just take the wastewater and take it somewhere to either dump it or reprocess it.
50 feet wide and 2,100 gross tons. Its freeboard, or height above the waterline when loaded, about 7.5 feet high at the bow and 4.5 feet at the stern. But the empty freeboard was 20 feet at the bow and 16 feet at the stern, exceptionally high for a barge. This vessel was one of 2 used by the City of Philadelphia to move wastewater sludge between their pollution control plant and a privately owned and operated recycling facility.
So you can see the duck boat size comparison.
Moving these vessels or towing them from point to point is typically performed by harbor tugs, with an upper wheelhouse perched much higher than that of the typical pusher tugs seen on inland waterways. The tank barge's height above the waterline, along with additional length and beam, requires that much extra effort to see over and around while navigating.
See, this is important here. I don't know how well you can see it, how large. If you're seeing it on your phone, it's probably not that easy to see. But back here in the back, we've got the tug in the upper right area here. And you have like the main part of the mast of the cabin where the chart room and everything is, but also up above it, there's another wheelhouse. There's a wheelhouse up here, which is set up higher than the rest of the ship so that they can see in front of them. They've got a long distance to see, so there has to be something of an angle so that they can see what's happening as close as possible in front of them.
Kidding. The tugboat Caribbean Sea, built in 1961 by Equitable Shipyard of Madisonville, Louisiana, started its life as the Clinton C. Sanok. The vessel, purpose-built for coastal ocean towing, was of twin-screw, twin-rudder design, originally built with only the standard height single wheelhouse. The tugboat would change hands many times throughout its life, quite common for these vessels. At 79 feet long, 24 feet wide, and with a draft of 10 feet deep, it was powered by twin 1,200 horsepower diesel engines. The original height would be increased at some point throughout its life, when the upper wheelhouse was added to give.
Okay, so again, that's what they were just talking about. There's a wheel. The original wheelhouse is down here in the middle, right underneath this middle red line. There's the wheelhouse here. And then I guess to give it greater visibility over the barge, they added another wheelhouse up top here. So you can sit up in there and you can see at a better angle what's in front of you. Because if you're pushing something and you're standing in the lower wheelhouse, especially something that's got a draft of 20 feet or 6 point whatever meters, you're not going to see anything. You're going to see the back of the ship, back of the barge. Island says, wait, so the tug is pushing, not tugging. Well, the tugs do both. They push, they pull, and they also, as we're going to see in this one, they can actually nudge from the side. There, you can tie ropes to them and tow things along, or you can push it. It doesn't really matter. They're designed to do everything. They're just workhorses. That's really all they are.
Operators a view roughly 35 feet above the waterline. The upper wheelhouse capable of independently controlling steering and throttles. And while the small enclosure did have heaters for the cold season, it was not equipped with air conditioning like the main wheelhouse. Foreshadowing for later in this video.
Uh-oh, it's a little warm.
The originally named Clinton C. Sanok changed names several times. In 1989, changed to the H.D. Campbell. 1994, the Peter M. 98, the Vivian L. Roerich.
Not unusual. Tugs get bought and sold.
It's unclear exactly when this upper wheel.
A good chunk of my business is buying and selling tugboats. So, yeah, it's not. I mean, these things get bought and sold all the time. It's not unusual for it to get sold every few years.
The house was added, but I've noticed it's in place as early as the vessel's Vivian Roerich chapter. Then in 2007, the Roerich would be purchased by KC Transportation Partnership of East Brunswick, New Jersey, where it was renamed to Caribbean Sea. When operating under KC Transportation, the crew of 5 would consist of the ship's captain, a licensed master, 1 licensed mate, 2 deckhands, and 1 licensed engineer. Each shift of 5 would live on the tugboat during its operations in and around the lower Schuylkill and Delaware River areas, with crew.
I'm sorry, I missed a super chat a few minutes ago, about 15 minutes ago. Sorry about that, AA Ron. AA Ron says, I saw this video before. He did a really good job putting it together. Brick Immortar is one of the best. Maritime Horrors, Brick Immortar. Seriously, 2 of the finest maritime accident people out there. And yeah, this video is stupendous. So I kind of feel bad that I don't have a lot to talk about. So thank you so much for that. For the $20 super chat, that means we're 70 away from unleashing the pig dog cam. 70 away.
Changeover taking place every 2 weeks. While offices and ticketing were located in the Philadelphia Bourse Building, the Ride the Ducks Philadelphia boarding location was more akin to that of a bus stop, where guests boarded and disembarked at 6th and Chestnut via the rear boarding ladders. since this area of the city is so historic.
Yeah, see, it's an amphibious boat thing. So that's part of the kitsch. That's that's part of their deal. We pick you up in the boat, we drive you around through the historical district, and then we just drive off into the water. So it's part of the deal.
The sightseeing drive, winding through the often narrow streets, was quite extensive, about 35 to 40 minutes long. Once the ducks reached Race Street, this led them straight to their dedicated launch ramp, reserved exclusively for Ride the Ducks. Splashing in on the north side of the Race Street Pier, they would turn south once beyond the pier, required to remain within 1,000 feet from shore and no more than 300 yards away from each pier's east end. They'd be in the ship channel, but would be required to, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, stay well clear of the shipping lane traffic upon the Delaware River.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing. They're allowed to be in the river. They're allowed to be in the Delaware River, but they have to stay within this green area. And, they have to stay close to shore, stay out of the way of the other ships. So normally, the duck boat tours and things will be out on lakes and places like that where they're not engaged with other commercial ships. This was an exception. So they're operating with barges and other ships in the area.
Potential pre-planned points for either emergency egress or grounding were just south of the residential pier, inside the Penn's Landing Marina, or just beyond it to the south. At a point east of the marina's opening, the ducks would turn around and head back north, exiting via the same dedicated ramp. The water tour no more than 30 minutes total, then disembarking back at the 6th and Chestnut location. Ride the Ducks under Hirsch and Family Entertainment, though, in hindsight, is widely known to have been cutting corners in many areas. For example, from the beginning, they wanted to operate each duck tour with a single crew member, regardless of location. A licensed captain that would act as driver on land, pilot in the water, narrator, tour guide, and of course, with no assistance, expected to be their own lookout throughout. The ducks, by their nature on road, have several blind spots compared to that of typical passenger vehicles. For example, the large bow and driver's position, combined with more cockpit obstructions than that of a normal vehicle of this size, have led to multiple incidents in the past where vehicles, pedestrians, or motorcyclists have been struck, rear-ended, dragged, even killed, due in large part to lack of visibility while traveling through busy streets.
So stupid. Just the concept of it is stupid.
And in the water, they are quite vulnerable due to their slow speed and relatively low amount of maneuverability, along with additional stability needs requiring operation in only the calmest of waters. The modified original ducks have minimal freeboard when loaded and so on, a lot to manage, exacerbated in demanding locations. But contrary to some of the Ride the Ducks locations, and I believe which may have helped set a precedent for some of their other locations going forward, the Philadelphia Ducks were operating in a much busier water environment, the Delaware River, in the vicinity of Penn's Landing. The U.S. Coast Guard, aware of this and the Ducks' capabilities limited to calm, protected waters, issued a mandate in 2004 to Ride the Ducks Philadelphia. They're in their second year of operation, requiring them to add a second crew member to all tours, so that one crew member would always be free during the water transit to act as lookout.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You don't want to have the captain or the pilot of the boat also doing tours, also looking out for other things, also, driving around on the roads. Come on. I mean, why they even thought that was a good idea? They probably didn't even think it was a good idea to begin with. They probably just did it purely for money, just for cost saving. Yeah, one guy can handle being the chauffeur, giving a tour, and being the captain and pilot at the same time. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. So at least people stepped in and said, yeah, no, you're going to have at least two people. You need at least a lookout, another person to be a lookout while you drive the damn thing.
Referred to in the maritime world as a deckhand. The Coast Guard was also much more active in the Delaware River area than, say, inland waters like Table Rock Lake and Branson. So operations like these were on their radar constantly. Ride the Ducks corporate, of course, fought this tooth and nail, penning a long-winded appeal. In their rejection letter, responding to the company's appeal, the Coast Guard stating,
"See, so look, even though they're told to do this, Even though they're told to do this, they still appeal it. They're like, no, we only want one person. We don't want another safety person on board. And while we're paused here, I noticed that we've got a few people. We got 333 people here. That's halfway to Satan. 333. It's half of 666. So 333. We're halfway to Satan. We've got 188 likes. That means like 150 some odd of you haven't done your job. So smack down there and smack that like button. We've got our like and subscribe poll. We've got 186 votes. And 27% of them are here. Take my money, give me dogs. That's like more than 1 in 4, which means, by my guess, by my calculation, there should be just about 50 super chats, but I'm only seeing 2. Just saying. Some of you say, here, take my money, but you don't give it. just semi-kidding. All right, let's get back. Why would they possibly be objecting and trying to appeal a decision to be more safe? Let's find out.
We make this decision based on a number of safety issues that are unique to operating on the Delaware River in the vicinity of Penn's Landing. Compared to the relatively benign operating environments of your other docks, i.e. lakes and protected harbors with little or no commercial traffic, the Philadelphia operation involves a more hazardous environment, which presents added safety risks. The operating route is within close proximity of the shipping.
Yeah. Oh, well, other people don't have to have two lookouts, which is ridiculous. They should. There should be at least 2 people on every boat. But other people don't have to do. Well, they're not in shipping lanes either, are they?
Channel, where deep draft and towing vessels traverse on a regular basis, creating a heightened risk of collision or swamping. By your own admission, your operators must be careful to maneuver the vessel to minimize wake impact. Furthermore, with a maximum speed of perhaps 7 knots, the ducks only have limited maneuverability, which is further exacerbated by river currents upwards of 4 knots. Finally, we're aware of at least 2 incidents last summer where debris caused damage to propellers, rudders, struts, and/or shafts. The amount
these kind of tugs, this isn't what we're dealing with here. This kind of tug and tow are really cool. I love these because there's like a slot that's built specifically for the tugboat. The tugboat just sits in this slot and it can push it and it can operate just like a regular vessel. It's sort of like your Star Trek, sort of like the Enterprise, where like they had the saucer attaches to the quarters and the nacelles and things, but it can separate if it has to. This would be like doing a saucer separation here, like the tugboat just kind of backing off and separating from the barge. I really think these barges are cool.
Of debris in the river poses an additional risk liability.
Isn't that cool how they just got the tug just slides right in there and it just turns it into a big old boat.
When taken in combination, these risk factors lead us to conclude that your Philadelphia dock operations require the addition of a deckhand.
Hey,
the Coast Guard would go on to say, beyond the elevated risks associated with the vessel route, we consider having 38 passengers an unwieldy number for one person to manage, particularly in the event of an emergency. Typically, small passenger vessel operations require employment of 1 or more deckhands.
My camera was attacked by a dog.
Master, regardless of passenger capacity, vessel design, or route. Requests to drop the deckhand are considered on an individual basis. However, upon review of the entire fleet of small passenger vessels inspected in the OCMI Philadelphia zone, the most passengers allowed for a single pilot operation is 14. The master's primary focus needs to be on safe navigation of the vessel. Crowd control issues must not interfere with this duty. In the event of an emergency,
makes sense, doesn't
the
it?
deckhand is available to assist with passenger control and emergency procedures, including handing out life jackets, relaying safety instructions, and keeping general order. Coupled with the added risk factors explained before, we consider the addition of a deckhand essential to safe operation of the Philadelphia docks. Also, in what appears to follow the pattern of docks modified by Ride the Ducks and their subsidiaries, the Philadelphia fleet was all too familiar with constant breakdowns and maintenance issues.
Same thing, Quick Bites. You know what I meant.
June 2005, Duck 22 suffered a propulsion failure with passengers on board when it struck a submerged object in the Delaware River, causing the propeller shaft yoke to break. The Coast Guard noting that neither the vessel nor the company notified authorities as the duck sat without propulsion on the Delaware. Fortunately, with no injuries, the vessel was likely towed to safety by a fellow duck eventually. August 2005. Duck 45 suffered engine failure on the Delaware near the Ben Franklin Bridge. Luckily, no injuries were reported, but the Coast Guard noted 36 passengers total being aboard at the time. May 2006. Duck 22 again experiences loss of propulsion while underway on the Delaware with 36 passengers on board. This time due to engine failure when a radiator hose
So loss of
dislodged,
propulsion is
causing the engine
not
to
an
overheat,
unheard of
shut down.
problem for the duck boats on this
After
river.
sitting anchored, the vessel would be towed to safety and fortunately, no injuries were reported. May 2007. Duck 24 reports loss of main steering system while underway on the Delaware with passengers aboard. Fortunately, a manual backup control system was employed, and the vessel was able to make it back to the exit under its own power. July 2009. Duck 25 experienced loss of propulsion while underway on the Delaware with
See how
passengers aboard.
common this loss
Tied
of
up to a pier
propulsion
near
is
the
for
Ben
these
Franklin
damn
Bridge,
duck boats.
they would end up being towed to safety by Duck 34. A portion of the propeller drive had sheared off while underway. Again, authorities were not notified, and it's suspected Ride the Ducks was attempting to resolve the situation without intervention. When the Coast Guard did intervene and inspected each vessel, Duck 25 and 34 were found to have both been operating beyond the expiration dates of their certificates of inspection.
Now that's some bad stuff right there. That's right. If you are operating under under expired certificates, especially your inspections, I assume that they have classification surveys for duck boats, but if you are operating with expired inspection certificates, guess what? Your insurance is probably invalid. So there's a good chance that the people riding on both of those duck boats in July 2009 had no clue that those ships may have been uninsured. Yeah, that it is no bueno when your certificates are expired and you are still operating the vessel. Aspen Fallen with the $5 super chat, currently planning a March trip and was considering Branson Mo. Coincidence? Yes. My last trip, Lake Superior, was also thanks to Maritime Monday. Ha. Hey, I've always wanted to go to Branson. Branson seems like a fun place to be. Dang, enjoy it. Just, I don't think they do the duck boat tours there anymore. But if they do, don't go on them. Just saying. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. All right, so let's hear some more problems with duck boats, shall we? And for those of you keeping score at home, that is 35. So that's 65 away from Dog Cam.
At a depth of 40 plus feet, the Delaware River Ship Channel is navigable by ocean-going, deep draft vessels of many types. Even just taking a quick look right near Penn's Landing itself, there are vessels berthed in and transiting the area, hulking in size, especially when compared to the average 33-foot amphibious duck. Not all barges of sizes similar to the Resource are built and transported in the same fashion, even amongst those operated by KC. Many are designed.
So the Resource is the tug in question here. It's the tug that, the tow. The barge's name is the Resource.
With what's called a push notch at the stern of the vessel. A standard tugboat, even one like the Caribbean Sea, utilizing a deep enough notch with integrated tugboat or ITB connections, can latch on, creating a single integrated tub barge unit. The ITB can operate in sea and weather conditions where conventional barges can't. When these barges are the same size as the Resource, they still require the added upper pilot house due to their high freeboard, but tend to be more workable, especially on longer journeys.
But
the Resource and the Recycler, however, were two tank barges built specifically to only venture between the Northeast Water Pollution Control Plant on the Delaware River and the Biosolids Recycling Center on the Schuylkill River for the city of Philadelphia. A relatively short haul at about 11.7 nautical miles, not requiring open ocean transit. The water control plant loaded them regularly with wastewater sludge, which was offloaded at Biosolids for processing. With only a shallow stern indentation, rather than a full ITB notch, short distance between docks, and frequency of moves, it meant these two were often pushed in a hip-toe configuration instead. On Wednesday, July 7th.
Yeah, because there you can see that this doesn't have like the deep notch like the other ships does. It's just this little dent. I don't know if you can see it clearly. It's this slightly darker area. It's just a little indentation where the nose, right where the very tip of the bow of the tug would go in and push it around. So they're doing what's called the hip toe, which is kind of like you can see here. They tie off and then they sort of push from the rear quarter. They're on like one of the sides, basically on the hip of the barge, and they're pushing it along.
7th, KC Transportation was carrying out their contract for the city of Philadelphia to move the resource and recycler from their berth at Biosolids back to the water pollution control plant for reloading.
Yeah, so that's the
Since
hip toe
they were
there.
empty, this meant their freeboard would be at its maximum height, 20 feet above the water line at the bow.
Okay, again, that's something important to note. They were empty. They were in ballast condition. There's nothing there. So their freeboard, again, the distance between the water and the deck, top of the deck, is 6.8 something meters, 20 feet. So it's very, very high, which does come into play later.
The tugboat Caribbean Sea was tied at the hip of the barge's port side, with the tugboat's starboard side pushed against it. While less favorable than the position of an ITB tow, this still allows for control over the vessel in all directions. Duck 34 would complete 2 tours on Wednesday, July 7th with no incident, returning from the second by 1:15 p.m. Boarding took place around 1:30 for Duck 34's third tour that day. In addition to the master was a total of 35 passengers, which included a group of 13 Hungarian students and their 2 teachers, all with varying levels of English comprehension. They were accompanied by their 7 local American hosts, amongst the other guests aboard. In interviews afterwards, a handful of passengers noting that safety briefings were given via voice only for the most part, far less demonstration and gesture-based compared to, say, airline briefings.
So yeah, again, there's a reason why in airplanes they do all the actions. 1, deaf people. 2, whatever language you're speaking people. Even if they don't understand what you're saying, they can still follow the motions. They weren't doing that here. They were just they were telling a boatload of foreigners how to handle safety procedures.
The passengers ranged from 8 to 72 years old. Duck 44 boarded 32 passengers and got underway soon after number 34 departed. Reaching the duck ramp, the routine was to pick up the deckhand, just prior to entering the water. Both the captain and deckhand were licensed to operate the vessel during the water transit, alternating duties of narration, engaging with the guests, acting as lookout, and water piloting according to their company policies.
That's still way too
Duck
much.
34 would splash in at about 2:15, the master making a routine call out on Channel 13, alerting local marine traffic to their presence. He would soon switch to the jump seat to act as tour guide and lookout while the deckhand took the controls. Of the 5 crew on board the tugboat Caribbean Sea, the master...
Well, Michael Burke asked, so the tug didn't have a view over the freeboard of the barge they were pushing. Well, you'll just have to wait and see the answer to that, because I'm going to say yes and no. And so again, what's being asked basically is, can you see over the barge? That's why they have that upper higher deck, so you have a little better angle, so you can see a little closer to the front of the barge. We'll just have to see what really happened.
And deckhand number 1 were scheduled to be off duty and in their bunks, while the mate, second ranking officer on board, deckhand 2, and the engineer remained on duty for the trip north. Prior to getting underway, though, the master had made clear to the mate his expectations of preferred positioning against the side of the barge, along with his expectations for the mate to use the upper wheelhouse for their transit northbound, due to the barge's high freeboard, while empty and near zero visibility forward of the vessel from the main wheelhouse. "No problem, you don't have to worry, that's normal. That's where I would be," the mate responded.
So there you go. This is sort of, again, this is sort of the visibility from the lower wheelhouse, the original wheelhouse. so that you really can't see in front of it at all. You're just sort of looking out straight towards the horizon at this height. But if you get in the upper wheelhouse, there's a little bit more of a down angle, so you can see a little bit closer. So that's why he's said, "Look, you're on duty. You're the officer of the watch. I want you in the upper wheelhouse." He's like, "Sure, no problem. Of course that's where I'm going to be."
The master and deckhand number 1 around this time would retire to their quarters for lunch and rest. Important to note, though, the NTSB points out that there was no written company policy with KC at the time, requiring which wheelhouse to navigate from when the sludge barges were empty, and that the master did not note these directions into his standing orders for the vessel either. It was later confirmed to have been made and acknowledged verbally only. Held fast in a starboard hip tow to the Resource's port side, the mate got the tow underway roughly 1 hour prior to Duck 34 splashing in, 1:15 p.m. The biosolids facility had recently finished unloading the barge, and they were en route back to the Northeast Water Pollution Control Plant. They'd make their way north in the river channel at a speed of about 6 knots. The high temperature that day, a miserable 103 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 Celsius, setting records as one of the hottest days in Philadelphia history. Duck 34 had completed their turnaround and was proceeding northward, back toward the exit ramp. Duck 44 behind and starboard by about 150 feet. At 2:25 p.m., with the deckhand at the helm, the captain, sitting in the jump seat, noticed what appeared to be smoke from the engine's starboard compartment vent. The deckhand and captain would switch positions. Once in the jump seat, the deckhand requested the nearest 4 passengers in the first row of seats step back to avoid the smoke. The captain took fire mitigation actions, closing both port and starboard engine vents, securing the ignition switch, activating the emergency fuel shutoff, and closing the forward hatch.
Sounds good.
The captain would stop short, though, of activating the fire suppression CO2 system, as he wasn't 100% sure whether it was smoke or just steam, and also didn't want the CO2 accumulating amongst the passengers. In interviews with authorities, the captain stated he immediately put out a call on VHF Channel 13 to all vessels in the vicinity. However, the NTSB finds no records of this call.
See, that's a problem that I find when I investigate ship accidents and things. Now it's a little bit easier to detect bullshit. Back then, it was becoming more common, but I doubt they had anything like this on these stupid duck boats. I know they didn't, as a matter of fact. Every vessel these days of any decent size has essentially the same thing as an airplane black box. It's a VDR. It's a voyage data recorder. It's exactly like an airplane's black box. It records all of the radar information, the chart information, the other vessel identification system information, all the alarms, all the signals, the speed, the angles of approach to other vessels. It records audio of the entire bridge. It's amazing the amount of data that gets recorded in these voyage data recorders. So now if you're investigating an accident, people go, "Oh no, we sounded the ship's horn," which sounds like this. "Oh no, we sounded that to get the other guy's attention, and then we were calling on the radio trying to get his attention, but they didn't answer." All you got to do is play back the VDR data, play back the black box info, and go, "Yep, I'm listening to the audio, and I don't hear any of these ships' whistles. I don't hear anybody talking on the bridge at all." Or alternatively, you hear them having parties and things like that. So now it's much easier to sort through the bullshit. Back then, it wasn't quite as good. It wasn't quite as, and I still like these stupid duck boats wouldn't have a VDR system on them. So basically, saying we called out, but nobody seemed to have heard this mysterious call that the duck boat allegedly made.
Regardless, Duck 44 was within sight, and upon seeing 34's issues, maneuvered within hailing distance to offer assistance. Duck 34's crew let them know everything's good, and that the problem had been radioed in to the Ride the Ducks office. "Finish the tour, everything's all right," the deckhand told Duck 44's master. Duck 44 was also not fitted with the necessary equipment to perform a safe tow anyway. A manager from the offices using the direct connect radio informed the ducks that number 46 was being dispatched separately to tow Duck 34. By this point, Duck 34 had already drifted a bit, so roughly 3 minutes after they'd shut down propulsion, the captain ordered the deckhand to go forward and drop the anchor. The anchor took about 4 minutes to set, dragging along the bottom about 155 feet before catching, anchoring the vessel close to the center of the navigation channel by about 2:33 p.m.
Okay, see, now that's the problem. They're told to stay out of the navigational routes, out of the they call them fairways, out of the fairway. But it was kind of sort of in the middle of it at this point when it broke down, and they set the anchor. So, but the master of the duck boat, I think, did the absolute right things. He went to check. He didn't see a fire, so he didn't initiate the fire suppression stuff. He just shut it down, conducted his little inspection to see what was going on. Sounds pretty reasonable so far. Oh, and while we're stopped here, let's make sure we acknowledge Tammy F. Thank you so much, Tammy F. With a $5 super chat. You get another ring just because you're Tammy F. Maritime Monday with the Law Racks. All is right in the world. Cheers, Jeff. Cheers to you, Tammy F. Thank you so much for your support. And Bass, we'll give you a ring too, brother. Ducks with problems? Where's Emilio Estevez? No, those were mighty ducks. These are just ducks. These are just duck boats. Thank you so much for being a member for 15 months. One of the OG members. Deeply, deeply appreciated. Thank you so much for the support. And right now, I guess that puts us an even 60 away from Doggo Kim.
On board the tugboat, the engineer had gone below decks to perform his underway maintenance duties. Having seen the upper wheelhouse occupied, confident the mate had lookout duty in hand, deckhand number 2 would also go about his daily duties in other parts of the vessel.
Okay, so there we go. He was where he should be, right? He's up there. You can see him up there. There's actual photographs of the dude up there where he's supposed to be. So the question was asked. Let me guess. They weren't in the upper deck, the upper wheelhouse, so they couldn't see due to the freeboard of the empty barge. Well, there he is. So he goes, aha, the guy's in the upper wheelhouse. It's occupied. Great. The mate's got the lookout in hand. All is good. So far, everything is just peachy keen. And Cindy T off work today and should do something around the house, but have to catch Maritime Monday first. Well, sit back and enjoy the last hour because we're here and we're going to be duck boating right along until the very last minute. So Cindy T, thank you so much for that super chat. It's deeply appreciated. And you move us $5 closer to pig dogs. Thank you.
In hand. Deckhand number 2 would also go about his daily duties in other parts of the vessel. However, once underway, the mate immediately started placing numerous calls on his personal cell, roughly 8 miles.
Okay. All right. Did y'all hear that? I know I was talking because I was responding to MG Law. He says, but you still can't see from up there. You can see better from up there. But yeah, immediately after they get underway, he starts placing personal phone calls on his cell phone.
The mate immediately started placing numerous calls on his personal cell. Roughly 8 miles into the journey and nearing Penn's Landing, 18 calls on the mate's cell, both incoming and outgoing, had been made, of varying lengths, totaling about 53 minutes.
18 calls.
Which investigators would later discover and confirm were due to the mate dealing with a legitimate, serious family medical emergency.
Okay, so this is the thing here. This is where it's a bit odd. See, you're going, okay, well, the mother effer's talking on his cell phone. He's made 18 calls, totaling 53 minutes, and they've barely been on the water 53 minutes. But this is legit what he's talking about. What had apparently happened was the mate that was on duty, his son had gone in for like a routine medical procedure on his eye. And in the middle of the procedure, the kid had stopped breathing and was suffering like some brain damage. So dude is on the phone with his family while his kid is having this emergency medical situation going on while he's trying to navigate this tug and push this tow up the river to the north. So he wasn't just, dicking around with his friends talking about getting a beer on Friday. He was dealing with a legitimate family medical emergency where his son had stopped breathing during eye surgery. Mo Raiders, what's up, Mo Raiders? Mo Raiders, welcome. We got 366 concurrent viewers here right now. Thank you so much. Make sure you hit the like button. And if you don't know who I am and you're just following Mo, subscribe to me and find out. We're talking about a shipping disaster today. Oh, Tammy F, who's been a member for 3 months. Thank you so much, Tammy F. I remember going to see the tall ships at Penn's Landing, so I'm picturing this with Duckboats, since with Duckboats with sails. No, don't picture that. Thank you so much for being a member for 3 months. And Squizgar2322 with a $5 super chat. Sounds like the mate had the worst day of his life. It gets worse. As always with Maritime Monday, it gets worse. So again, you kind of want to go, all right, I understand the dude. The dude is having a legitimate medical emergency where his son is suffering brain damage and may die because of routine eye surgery. But well, let's see how this plays out. Thank both of you for the super support. I love you both. Squizgar and Tammy F again.
As the Resource and Caribbean Sea passed by Penn's Landing, the area on shore happened to be bustling with tourists and locals.
Okay, we need to okay, Bass, we need to make sure everybody understands here. I wouldn't want to listen to the dude freak out for 53 minutes. The guy on the tugboat was the guy that was having the medical emergency. The guy on the duckboat was okay. The duckboat had just stopped moving because the engine conked out. And he thought he saw smoke and he was checking out the engine to make sure that it was, that they weren't actually on fire. The guy that was having his son was having the medical emergency is the mate that is piloting the tugboat pushing the barge. That's where the medical emergency is. So yeah, nobody can hear him freaking out.
The following pictures can be seen where the upper wheelhouse is clearly not occupied. The space is small enough such that a crew member present in these lighting conditions would.
Okay, so here we have one of our first problems from the tug side. Just a minute ago, when they were when they had a picture of the ship of the tug getting underway, there was the mate in the wheelhouse. He was up there. He's in the upper wheelhouse. Now we've got an empty wheelhouse where there's clearly nobody there. So when the question was asked a minute ago, are you saying there's nobody in the upper wheelhouse at the time? That's why I said yes and no. The mate was up there in the wheelhouse until he wasn't. So yeah, he was up there. He was up there where he should have been until he wasn't up there where he should have been.
Very clearly be visible through these windows. Instead, on the phone, not in the upper wheelhouse, and having not requested deckhand number 2 relieve his position as lookout, the mate was currently on a call that initiated at 2:32 p.m. as they passed in front of Penn's Landing. Just prior to this, Duck 34's crew first noticed the barge and Caribbean Sea at roughly 1 nautical mile of separation, also claiming in a later interview to have placed another call out on VHF Channel 13 to alert local marine traffic of their situation. However, authorities were unable to verify this call as well.
So everybody's
the
saying
distance,
they're
though,
calling,
and perspective they had on the barge at the time gave them the impression it was taking maneuvers to avoid them. After the initial sighting was around the time the deckhand was ordered to go out on the bow and drop anchor. As the distance between the vessels closed and the anchor stopped their drift, the deckhand remained out on the bow, assumed to be sharing lookout duty by the captain, but hadn't been specifically ordered to do so. After all, standing atop the bow would allow for a much clearer view of the duckboat's surroundings.
See, this is the thing. The guy went out there to drop the anchor, to check all the engines and stuff. And where he was standing, he had a perfect view. He had a perfect view of the barge approaching. From at least, he could have seen it at least a mile away, because as we're going to look at later in the NTSB report, visibility was about 10 miles that day. So he very easily would have seen the barge a mile away if he had been looking. So he's dropped the anchor. What was he doing whilst he was standing up there? That's the question.
Instead, The deckhand would take out a cell phone and begin texting back and forth with a friend.
This dude didn't have a medical emergency. This dude was just texting with his friend, as we can see here in this video. So yeah, he didn't see the barge coming because he was texting with his phone, and the guy in the barge didn't see the duck boat because he was calling and texting on his phone.
In the meantime, the captain had finished manually sealing up additional compartment vents, typically used for heat dissipation. They were still allowing a bit of vapor to enter the passenger compartment, so he took the time to seal it off while they waited. With the vapors clear, the captain then had the 4 passengers originally from the front return to their seats. It was around this same time he looked up to see that the tow had actually not changed course and was bearing down on their vessel.
Oops.
With the bow of the Resource 2 minutes away, the captain began making calls out directly addressing the Caribbean Sea on Channel 13, to no avail. These calls are on record and confirmed by authorities. The passenger ferry Freedom, within sight of both vessels, also attempted to call out immediately after Duck 34's attempt, and then switched to Channel 16 to notify the Coast Guard. Some, but not all passengers, recalled hearing the captain give instructions to don life jackets, and in an interview with one of the survivors, one of the ladies from our church got up and she yelled, "We've got to move," and she started pulling down the life vests, and people started screaming, and other people were getting up and pulling life vests down, and that's right before the barge hit.
Yeah, and real quick, I want to show just a couple of stills from an AP news story about this. So let me pull this down here real quick and put up another screen. This one right here. So this is from cell phone video that was taken.
He radioed the tug before the crash and received no response.
And there's the image of it just plowing straight over the top of the duck boat. And Fun Dine, what's up, Fun Dine, who's been a member for 6 months. He's the OG of the OGs. Not many more people have been a member for more than 6 months. Thank you so much, Fun Dine, for that. This is why my phone stays out of reach while driving or operating any machinery. Phones aren't worth dying for. Absolutely correct. You got people out there, seriously, put the phone away. It ain't worth it. All right, let's jump back into the video here. So everybody's talking on their phones.
Fortunately, many passengers followed the example of others. Although unable to fasten the life vest properly in such a short amount of time, they did have them in hand, or at least freed them from their placements in the canopy. The deckhand leapt from the bow of the duck with no life jacket.
Now, remember this, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about this here in just a bit. Did I say 6? I meant 16. I thought I said 16. I said 16, didn't I? Flux, who's been a member for 17 months, has beat Fun Dine. There you go. Flux, bring in the heat. Bring in the super chat heat. I thought I said 16, but anyway, if I said 6, I meant 16. Maybe I said 6 and you didn't hear me say teen. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But remember this, what he just said. The deckhand, the guy that was standing on the front of the duck boat, texting his friend, he jumped off the bow of the duck boat into the water without his life jacket. I'm going to tell you a little story about that here in just a little bit. So stay tuned for that.
In this configuration, though, and with what authorities felt was lacking instructions overall on emergency egress, along with an exceedingly delayed call for action by the captain, if any, no one but the deckhand escaped the vessel prior to impact. The barge struck the passenger
So
vessel
literally
at 2:37
nobody got off the
p.m.,
duck boat
impacting
before
on
it was
its stern and
underwater,
slightly
except
to
for the
port.
guy on the front.
In a process that took about 10 seconds, the duck was rolled over onto its starboard side and pushed completely underwater. The vessel would never resurface, sinking immediately in water roughly 55 feet deep.
Damn. 10 seconds. You got 10 seconds from the time you're hit until you're underwater forever. And the only guy that got off before it went underwater was the guy that was standing on the bow.
Now, according to the NTSB, most passengers could not recollect just how they'd evacuated and made it back to the surface. Many recounting that one moment they were underwater, the next back on the surface.
See, and that's, whatever you may believe in deities, higher beings, fate, karma, whatever. The fact that these people have no recollection whatsoever of how they managed to get out of the boat and get to the surface of the water is amazing. Dave T. This was in Philadelphia in 2010 on the Delaware River. So, angels, divine intervention, karma, whatever you want to call it. There's an entire boat full of people. The majority have no idea how they got out and got to the surface.
Some said they remembered seeing sunlight eventually peeking through the water and swam towards it. For those who'd lost track of their life jackets, fortunately, there were many scattered about on the surface near where the victims popped up. Most found flotation nearby quickly. The ferry Freedom was on its normal River Link route at this time, back and forth from Camden to Penn's Landing, and made their best possible speed toward the accident site. Upon arrival, they began assisting survivors and were quickly followed by 2 Marine police boats, 3 Coast Guard rescue boats, and a Navy team on a Zodiac, all of which on scene within just a few minutes. Many passengers were helped out of the water onto the boats, while others made it to shore and were helped by multiple first responders and Samaritans on scene as well. It probably goes without saying, but no one was injured aboard the Tugboat Caribbean Sea.
Well, see, I know that the tugboat would have felt going over the duck boat. There's just not that great of a size differential, but I'm pausing here for a second. But I've had many cases where you'll get a ship that's 50 or 60,000 tons, plus it's loaded with 4,000 or 5,000 containers. And this will hit like just a couple of we'll say a 50-ton wooden shipping boat, little fishing boat. Sorry, you'll get this ship that weighs 60,000 tons, loaded down with 5,000 containers that just weigh thousands of pounds each, taking out a 50-ton fiberglass fishing boat. They don't even know they've hit it. There's no difference between a fishing boat and a wave at that point. That happens a lot where fishing boats are involved in accidents with these larger container vessels and things. The first that these people often hear about the accident is when the Coast Guard shows up and says you plowed over a fishing boat and killed 4 people 30 minutes ago. And they have no clue. They have no idea they've hit it. But in this case, I mean, the size differential is not that great. And we'll see, they knew they'd hit the boat, but they're just, and of course, if you can't feel it or hear it, you're not going to get injured by it. But so they were just, I'm just saying, even though they felt it, nobody was injured on this tugboat. Aaron has been a member for 15 months, some more OG. You would think with all the cameras we carry in our pockets, we would have more angles of these events. Again, this was 2010. So this was 14 years ago. It was sort of right there at the beginning of just mass communication with mass cell phone things going. It's understandable. But I mean, the fact we even have any is someone just happened to be watching this go down. but now we've got CCTV cameras everywhere and individual cameras. But let's get back to the video here. Thank you so much for your support, Aaron, member for 15 months. And bring back the screen. We need to stop that screen and bring back the right screen. And here we go. Hit the like and subscribe, by the way, people. Come on.
In total, 26 Tugboat passengers suffered minor injuries, according to the NTSB. And after exhaustive searches, 2 victims were never recovered on the day of the incident. A 20-year-old and 16-year-old, seated together in the second row on the starboard side, both from the group of Hungarian visitors. The Coast Guard and police searched tirelessly since the time of the incident, everyone hopeful they'd somehow survived.
Now, I can't show the video because it's from people that like to do copyright claims, news organizations and things like that. They like the copyright claims. But I told you to remember that the guy standing on the bow of the Tugboat jumped into the water, and he was the only one that made it off the boat before it went underwater. There's video, and again, we have the 2 Hungarian students that drowned. There's video showing there was a boy and a girl that drowned, showing the girl who drowned. The last image they really have before the Tugboat is crushed basically by the barge is that Hungarian girl throwing her life jacket to the guy that jumped off the bow of the Tugboat. That's the last image they have. The Hungarian girl that died throwing her life jacket to the Tugboat mate who had jumped off the bow. And there's an interview with her father talking about that. It's a thing. It's a terrible tragedy, but she essentially gave her life for that guy. So let's get back to
According to ABC Philadelphia and NPR, the first victim was finally found and their body recovered around 4:45 a.m. Friday, July 9th, 2 days later, just south of the Walt Whitman Bridge. The second victim recovered during the process of raising the sunken Tugboat about 3 p.m. that same afternoon. On board the Tugboat, as the barge drove the passenger vessel underwater, the deckhand and engineer were sitting at a crew table on the port side of the galley. They felt a sudden reduction in the 2 engines' RPMs and assumed they'd arrived at their destination.
Man, nope.
Looking out the porthole, though, the deckhand saw what looked like people in the water off their port side. The 2 went to the main deck, where they saw struggling victims and debris passing by their vessel to port and stern, pushed by the river current. The engineer rushed to the master's stateroom to alert him. Approaching in the passageway, he saw the stateroom door already open and the mate standing in the doorway.
So there we have the deal. He comes out instantly, and the mate, who's supposed to be in the upper wheelhouse, is just magically teleported to right in front of the fucking door. So that's basically when they know the mate who was on duty was not where he was supposed to have been, because he just magically appeared right there when he should have been upstairs.
He heard no conversation taking place and witnessed an expression on the mate that appeared to be disbelief, like, is this really happening? The mate had knocked on the master's door to wake him up and told him, I ran over a Tugboat.
Ugh.
The master threw on what clothes he had found quickly and rushed to the upper wheelhouse, taking over the vessel. They'd passed upriver far enough that they could not assist with victims in the water, and the Ferry Freedom had already made callouts to the Coast Guard on Channel 16. The master swung the tow to starboard and attempted to hold their position just upriver from the scene. After initial rescue and sweeps of the scene were complete, the Coast Guard units from Sector Delaware boarded the Caribbean Sea. 2 Coast Guard investigators interviewed the mate in the galley at about 3:44 p.m. At first, he'd informed investigators that he was in the upper wheelhouse at the time of the collision, but had not seen the duck prior. He also stated he did not hear any radio calls.
So did you hear that? What did he say? He told the investigators he was in the upper wheelhouse, when we know from pictures and where he was standing that he was not there. He lied to investigators.
At first, he'd informed investigators that he was in the upper wheelhouse at the time of the collision, but had not seen the duck prior. He also stated he did not hear any radio calls or see any targets on the tugboat's radar. The NTSB was also unable to verify any calls being made from the Caribbean Sea to any ducks in the area. Later in the evening, KC Transportation provided the mate an attorney, and the mate would invoke his right to the Fifth Amendment, refusing further interviews to any investigators, including the NTSB. At the mate's request, KC Transportation did provide the NTSB with a follow-up statement. The mate had informed them his young son experienced a life-threatening emergency during what was to be a relatively routine medical procedure that day. He had become consumed with dealing with this family crisis. He had also made no other crew members, including the master, aware that day that any of this was going on.
Bad move there.
Strangely, investigators also found the mate made the following entries in the tugboat's log.
Now, this is fucked up.
1:15, underway with barge The Resource from Southwest Sludge Dock, but then 2:30 p.m., made rounds, engine room and security, all secure at Northeast Sludge Dock with The Resource.
So he had pre-filled out the logbook. Those of you that are truckers or ship people know that you just don't do that shit. So he said at 2:30 they were already at the dock, and he'd made the rounds and made sure the ship was secure. But actually, here is where they were at 2:30. So he is falsifying the logbooks. Before the accident, he didn't falsify them because of the accident. He just filled them out in advance. That ain't what you do.
The tow, of course, never having arrived at the Northeast Sludge Dock during the expected time frame, let alone by 2:30. According to investigators, FBI forensics of the company-issued laptop, the one kept in the main wheelhouse, also revealed web searches starting around 2 p.m. and 2:20 p.m., along with subsequent following of those searches results.
So phone calls, searches on the
Ride the Ducks Philadelphia
laptop.
suspended all tours immediately following this incident and kept operations suspended for the remainder of the 2010 season. With the Coast Guard and NTSB present, the duck boat was raised on July 9th, the NTSB taking possession immediately thereafter, the canopy framing still intact, along with findings under the hood that caused the steam and subsequent lack of propulsion, which we will cover shortly. Although the NTSB found no issues in either vessel's crew with qualifications of crew members, fatigue, or drugs and alcohol use, and regarding the tugboat's potential to avoid the collision, no issues were found with weather and river conditions, waterway configurations, along with no issues in mechanical, electronic, and communications functions of the Caribbean Sea itself. Findings of primary cause by the NTSB did include the mate of the Caribbean Sea failing to maintain an appropriate lookout, including monitoring the radios, while navigating the vessel because he was distracted by personal use of his cell phone and the company laptop in dealing with the serious family medical emergency. Contrary to the master's instructions and contrary to his own post-accident statements, the mate of the Caribbean Sea was not navigating the vessel from the upper wheelhouse at the time of the collision. The mate of the Caribbean Sea should have been aware of his employer's prohibition of personal use of cell phones and company-provided computers while on watch. But on the day of the accident, he did not follow the policy. Had the mate of the Caribbean Sea informed the master or management at KC Transportation of the serious family medical emergency, he would likely have been granted relief from the watch.
Of course he would have been granted relief from the watch. Of course he would have been. Great Dane Mom says, was this the duck boat accident in Branson? No, we did that on another stream a few months ago. We did the duck boat 7 in Branson. This is duck boat 34 in Philadelphia on the Delaware River. We could change Maritime Monday to Duckboat Monday. There's so many of these duckboat accidents. But so basically what we've got so far in the story, and there's more to it, guy wasn't where he was supposed to have been. He was in the lower deck house, not the upper deck house. I mean, the upper wheelhouse, he was in the lower wheelhouse, not the upper wheelhouse. He was talking on his cell phone in violation of policy. He was using the company computer for searches in violation of company policy. He lied about being in the wheelhouse. He falsified his logs even though that really didn't have anything to do with the accident.
Secondary and contributing to the incident, according to the NTSB. The Duck 34 surge tank pressure cap was not in place at the time of the accident, and the missing pressure cap allowed the engine coolant to boil and create steam that entered the passenger compartment and prompted the master to shut down the engine because he believed he had an onboard fire.
So it's basically like not having a
mechanics
radiator.
Who performed post-trip inspections of Duck 34 failed to ensure that the surge tank pressure cap was securely in place before allowing the vehicle to enter passenger service. Duck 34 master did not fully appreciate or appropriately respond to the risk of a collision that faced Duck 34 and its occupants once he had shut down the vessel's engine and anchored in the navigable channel. Duck 34 deckhand's personal use of his cell phone to send text messages while he was on the bow of the vessel distracted him from effectively performing his duty as lookout. After a series of trials and then pleading guilty in autumn of 2011 to one count of misconduct of a ship causing passenger death, the Maid of the Caribbean Sea admitted he was distracted by his cell phone and the laptop for an extended period of time prior to the collision. Admitting to piloting from the main wheelhouse and not monitoring the marine radio frequencies during that time, that he intentionally lowered the volume to where it was inaudible so that he could concentrate and better hear his phone conversations.
So there you go. Add that to the list of things. Because he's got to talk on his cell phone in violation of policy, he turned down the radio. So he couldn't hear what we heard at the beginning of the show, which was the duckboat saying, hey, we're not moving. We're at anchor. We're disabled. We're dead in the water here. Look out, look out. And other people calling saying, look out, there's a duckboat. He couldn't hear any of those because he turned down the radio in order to concentrate on his phone calls. And again, he didn't tell anybody about his son's medical emergency. In what universe would you, as someone who is responsible for the safe operation of a barge, go to your captain or to the company and say, look, my son just has this major medical emergency. I've got all these problems and I'm supposed to go on watch and I can't concentrate. Nobody's going to say do it anyway. Nobody. But he sucked it up and tried to do it all himself and didn't tell anybody about this.
Along with remaining in the main wheelhouse as it was air conditioned, quieter, and feeling panicked and nauseated, allowed him to concentrate better, tending to his family emergency. Apologizing to the victims' families, breaking down several times while on the stand. The mate sentenced to 1 year in prison that began in January of 2012.
So yeah, he pled the fifth for a while, and then eventually he did the right thing and pled guilty to this mismanagement of a vessel resulting in death. And he was actually sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison. The poor wife, you know, you've got the kid, you've got, you know, the young kid, you got all this stuff going on, and then you lose the husband for a year.
As 2011 approached, for their part, Ride the Ducks Philadelphia did attempt to create a new route on the Schuylkill River, which I'm assuming would have been upriver from the weir, as barge traffic stops at that point on a peaceful portion of the water nearby the Schuylkill River Trail. It's reported, though, by several local news outlets and Ride the Ducks themselves. The city of Philadelphia did not approve this request, and when 2011's warm season approached, the Ducks resumed operations on the Delaware, but reportedly kept a rescue boat ready nearby and shortened the water transit overall. From the Ride the Ducks Philly From the Philly Ducks Facebook page posted on October 6, 2016. As of October 5, 2016, Ride the Ducks Philadelphia has suspended operations indefinitely. As the nation's largest amphibious tour operator and licensor, our mission is serving through sightseeing. We offer guests an experience that is fun, informative, and engaging so that we can serve our employees and communities. Due to circumstances outside of our control, including a 330% increase in our insurance premiums, continued operations in Philadelphia are not financially feasible at this time. We enjoyed serving the people of Philadelphia since 2003, serving over 1 million guests during that time. We are working with the 42 full and part-time employees from our Philadelphia location, offering severance and outplacement assistance. We regret having to close our operation, and we send good wishes and brotherly love to the people of Philadelphia.
Now, let me show you what I think is the real reason it's not operating anymore. Due to circumstances outside our control, including a 330% increase in our insurance premiums, continued operations in Philadelphia are not financially feasible at this time. Not because it's unsafe, not because of what we did, not because of anything. Well, because of this accident, our insurance premiums went up 330%. So now we can't afford insurance. So we've got to shut her on down. And legendary racing official womanizer of MG law. I don't know what that means, but 1 year and 1 day means prison, not jail. Jail would be 1 year less. I use prison and jail interchangeably normally because I'm in Korea and that's what they do here. They don't really differentiate between jail and prison. But yeah, a year gets you prison. Oh, we already answered that. Great Dane. I'm sorry.
From the NTSB's recommendations. To the U.S. Coast Guard, develop and implement an investigative protocol that directs your investigation officers to routinely check for non-operational use of cell phones and other wireless electronic devices. Revise your commercial vessel accident database to maintain a record of non-operational use of those same devices. Regulate and enforce the restriction on non-operational use of these devices until you can develop regulations governing non-operational use of cell phones and other wireless electronic devices by on-duty crew members in safety-critical positions. Continue your outreach program of information and education to the maritime industry on this issue.
Yep, you are correct, Alex Kane.
To Ride the Ducks International. Review Ride the Ducks International's existing safety management program and develop improved means to ensure that your company's safety and emergency procedures are understood and adhered to by employees in safety-critical positions. To KC Transportation Partners, review KC Transportation's existing safety management program and develop improved means to ensure that your company's safety and emergency procedures are understood and adhered to by employees in safety-critical positions. To operators in American waterways in general, notify your members of the circumstances of this accident and encourage them to ensure that their safety and emergency procedures are understood and adhered to by employees in safety-critical positions. The city of Philadelphia would also begin requiring separate lookouts on the bow of barges as a result. In stark contrast is the Boston Duck Tour's water route. From my contact representing Boston Ducks, the traffic on the Charles River in our area is mainly pleasure boating. The only commercial traffic is from 2 tourism boat companies upriver from us, so it's a very calm and serene spot we operate on. And indeed, this spot on the Charles is less prone to storms than, say, Table Rock Lake, and is not navigable by ocean-going or really any large craft.
Does that look safe to anybody? Like a car in a river, does that look safe to anybody? You could not pay me.
But as it pertains to the Ride the Ducks brand, remember, it is defunct now. This is not to say that there are no more duck tours operating around the world. Many of the issues related to duck tours using original World War II Army ducks stemmed from, what I can gather, negligence on behalf of Ride the Ducks International. Like we touched on earlier with Boston's duck tours, amphibious tours can be performed with more safety and reliability built in, but it takes a ton of honest, meticulous effort and purpose-built vessels, especially since old ducks that other operators may still use, they're not getting any younger. Work both behind the scenes during the ride, during the off-season, Training, routine maintenance, and so on is all crucial in amphibian tours. So you might know by now how much I like my NTSB op-eds, so here goes. On the ramming of Duck 34, the NTSB chairman at the...
Now, see, this is interesting thing. I was going to read this, but then he read it, so I don't have to, so yay him. Go, Sam. Yeah, this was at the end of, after the NTSB report, the National Transportation Safety Board report was concluded, they added this sort of, postscript onto the end of their findings and their opinion.
At the time, closed the report stating, "It is time to change public tolerance for distracted operations and elevate society's opprobrium, reproach, or criticism for transportation operators who use personal electronic devices."
And this was 2010. How much worse is it now, 14 years later? How much worse is it now? How many more people are just fucking around on their cell phones? How many more people are addicted to their cell phones and social media and computers and tablets and everything than there was in 2014? So here's the NTSB explaining why this needs to change and be made better, when it's probably much, much worse now.
This behavior is unsafe and unacceptable. On July 7, 2010, the Caribbean Sea tugboat barge combination ran over a sightseeing boat loaded with passengers on the Delaware River in Philadelphia. Although the mate made 13 outgoing calls and received 5 incoming calls in the 80 minutes prior to the accident, the tugboat's crew members did not report the mate's repeated use of his personal cell phone. They likely did not report it because they are used to this type of behavior.
Yep.
The fact that the mate repeatedly made and received calls unrelated to vessel operations showed that he, too, was comfortable with this behavior. Further, the mate spoke on his cell phone when other people were nearby. The potential for co-workers to observe him violating company policy did not deter his inappropriate behavior, nor was the company's clear policy against using personal electronic devices a deterrent. The NTSB has seen pervasive use of personal electronic devices across all modes of transportation. Perhaps the best-known aviation instance was when 2 airline pilots were out of radio communication with air traffic control for more than an hour because they were using their personal laptop computers. They overflew their destination by more than 100 miles and only realized their error when a flight attendant inquired about their arrival over the intercom.
Isn't that like the ultimate WTF? You're on a flight from point A to point B, and suddenly you're like way late getting to point B. And you're like, "Stewardess, when are we getting to point B?" And she's like, "Well, shit, I don't know." And so they use the intercom and go, "Hey, Captain, when are we getting to where we need to be?" And they're like, "Oh, shit." And they're like 100 miles past point B because they're fucking around on their computers on an airplane, a tube that somehow magically flies through space at several hundred miles an hour. And they're fucking around on their computers.
The NTSB identified distraction due to text messaging as the cause of a September 12, 2008 commuter train engineer running a red signal near Chatsworth, California. The result?
Foreign capital of the world.
A head-on collision with a freight train.
Oof.
25 people died and dozens were injured. The engineer, who had a history of using his cell phone for personal communications, sent 136 and received 114 text messages while on duty during the 3 days leading up to the accident. Distractions, as we all know, are a growing concern in our motor vehicles, especially as the handheld info and infotainment options in our vehicles increase. The consequences can be deadly. In one accident the NTSB investigated, in the 24 hours preceding the accident, the driver of a tractor-trailer truck made 97 calls and received 26 calls. In the half hour preceding the crash, the driver spent 14 minutes, nearly half his time, on the phone. 10 people died that day after the truck crossed the median. Even with company policies, widespread public education campaigns, and in some places, laws to minimize distractions like cell phone use, many people continue to think, "I'll make this quick call," or "I'll send a brief text message." The technology that created these problems also offers a potential to provide solutions. But as a society, How do we convey to manufacturers and operators that distractions at the wheel, helm, controls are just as unacceptable as driving under the influence? When will we say, this must stop, we cannot do this anymore? Here's a long view of transportation that may shed light on a path to address distracted operations. In 2006, the NTSB received a request from a historian to reconsider one of the first aviation accidents that the board investigated. The 1967 accident involved a Piedmont Airlines Boeing 727 and a private twin-engine aircraft that had a mid-air collision over North Carolina. All 82 people on board both planes were killed. The cockpit voice recorder identified that shortly after takeoff, the flight crew of the 727 discussed one of the cockpit ashtrays being on fire. As they put out the fire, the crew joked with the captain about burning his steak at that night's barbecue. However, smoking or burning cigarette ashtrays were such a common occurrence back then that the board did not even mention the event in the final report. In this time and culture, can you even begin to imagine smoking in an airplane, much less in the cockpit? What changed since 1967? The culture changed. We do not allow smoking on airplanes. It is not even remote.
See, that's always like the thing that freaks me out is at least on U.S. carriers, we haven't been able to smoke on planes since 1980s. And it always freaks me out when I get on a plane and I see like there's like an ashtray in the armrest where the ashtrays used to be on planes. Because I know when I see the ashtray on my plane, I know that this plane I'm on is at least 40 years old. That actually makes me more nervous than anything else about flying. Like my biggest nightmare is when I see ashtrays on the armrests of my planes. It freaks me the hell out because I'm like, holy shit, this thing is probably 50 years old.
Remotely considered. The consequence, society's disapproval, is that strong. I want our society to reach the point when texting or telephoning, whether you're operating a vessel, a train, or a motor vehicle, is just as unacceptable as smoking in a cockpit, or not wearing a seatbelt, or driving under the influence of alcohol. Culture change is possible. It has happened before. It must happen again, now. How many more lives will be lost before our society corrects its deadly acceptance of distractions?
Those are the two that died. And that's the video from our good friend Brick Immortar. Guy does some really amazing videos. And again, I urge you strongly to go over to his channel, subscribe to him, like everything he's ever done. He's got some amazing videos that you just don't want to miss. Like, he's a huge friend of the supporter of the program, and I support his channel. Love him to death. Great guy. Bass with a $4.99. Thank you so much. They still deliver brand new planes with ashtrays in the cockpit and lavatories. I don't know why. I've never been in a commercial airline cockpit. I haven't seen any in the lavatories though. But I've still every year or so I'll be on a plane that has one ashtray in the armrest, and it just creeps me out a little bit because I know it's really old. Alan Walsh says, nope, I prefer being on the older planes. You know, it's fucking built properly. How many planes have had accidents recently with doors falling off and shit? All the same type of aircraft, I may add. Yeah, if it's been flying for 40, 50 years, you know it's good because it's been flying for 40, 50. No, that ain't me. Sorry. I can't do that. That is my only real fear I have of flying, is like being on this ancient plane. All right, now to kind of sort of close things down, what I want to do is I want to read some excerpts from the NTSB report. This is where we see what the National Transportation Safety Board had to say. This is an 89-page report on this accident. Clearly, we're not going to read all of it. I just want to read some highlights about the analysis and the facts and their conclusions. So let me bring this on up, and we can embiggen it. Ooh, stop. And we'll do our little thing where we put me down over here, or can we ensmallen me more? There we go. We'll do this so we can see it. The hell is that? Somebody's dragging something down the street outside. Make sure we got everything done here. Bass, we got your super chat out of the way. Thank you so much. And my Mini 67 Legal Vices Duck W's were sketchy when they were built, and when you add superstructure and take away maintenance, they're a nightmare experience maintaining one for Military History Club. Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning of this stream, and as well in depth on our last stream we did a few months ago about the Duck 7 incident in Branson, Missouri. As we mentioned on both the beginning of this and that other video, these were literally just designed to be temporary troop transport. They were designed in the 1940s to last a couple of months, not to last 60, 80 years. They weren't designed to last 80 years. They were designed to last a couple of months. So yeah, there's no way you would get me on a Duck W, the World War II era duck boat. Not a fucking chance you would get me on one of those ever, unless it was in a museum somewhere. That's the only way to get anywhere near them. And Bernice Conklin says jail and prison are not the same thing. I've been in jail and a police station. I've done time in a state prison. Unless you happen to be in a country like Korea, where linguistically there is no difference between prison and jail. Korea, they have prison/jail, and they have detention centers. You stay in the detention center until trial, then they transfer you to prison/jail, whatever you want to call it. And I've been here much longer than I've lived in the States, so I just customarily use it in the Korean fashion, where jail and prison are the same thing. But that's generally, that's generally what it is. You're in jail until you're convicted, and you can serve, depending. We're not going to get all that right now, but basically, yeah, they're just interchangeable here in Korea. So let's read from this National Transportation Safety Board findings. But before we do that, I just want to mention that there's 359 concurrent viewers. That is a huge number for Maritime Monday. That is huge, and I'm so glad you're here to share this. We try to do this every Monday, but if there's trials in the way and whatnot, sometimes we have to postpone it or delay it. But this is what we try to do on Maritime Monday. We try to talk about maritime things on a Monday, and I'm so grateful that there's such a large number of you here for this. That really warms my heart. We got about 3.5 or 4 times more than we normally have for these streams. And we've got a good like ratio, 320 likes. Thank you so much for that. Make sure you take our like and subscribe poll. How are we doing here? Vote. More pig dog cam? No, but I liked it anyway, says 27%. So I liked 47%. And 26% of you, that's 1 in 4, say here, take my game, take my money, give me dogs, take my game. Here, take my money, give me dogs. So literally, I'm just looking over here. 1 in 4, there's 32. We'll just say, we'll say 8. There should be 80 super chats, but there's not been 80 super chats because like 80 of you have said, here, take my money. But no, anyway. What do we got here? We did get something coming in. Michael Boyle. Thank you so much, Michael Boyle. Welcome aboard, the newest member of the Clean and Sober crew. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate your support. And for those of you that are members, probably next weekend will be our February members only stream, although it will be in March. February's members only stream is going to be in March. Just deal with it. That's how we're going to roll on that. So thank you very much, Michael Boyle, for becoming the newest Legal Vices member. Right, here we go. Analysis. Let me bring the bigger screen up so I can see it. Analysis: the 4 individuals most directly involved with this accident, the master and the deckhand of the DUKW-34 and the master and the mate of the Caribbean Sun, met all state and federal requirements applicable to their position, so they're all qualified. A review of the government and company maintained medical records of the crew members of both vessels revealed no medical conditions that would have affected the crew members' ability to perform their job safely on the day of the accident. Post-accident toxicological that's a good word. That's a word I haven't said in a long time. Toxicological tests conducted on each individual were negative for the presence of alcohol, illegal drugs, and prescribed or over-the-counter medications. The National Weather Service reports visibility is 10 statute miles at the time of the accident. Winds were light to moderate, and river current was as predicted. The width of the navigation channel to the north and south of the accident was about 400 feet, with no obstructions that would have prevented either vessel's crew members from seeing the other vessel in time to prevent the collision. So they both could have seen each other clearly, but they didn't. At the site of the accident, the navigation channel was also 400 feet wide. The anchored APV was in the approximate center of the channel, allowing sufficient room for the tugboat barge combination to maneuver around the APV and still remain within the navigation channel. Had it not been possible for the tow combination to remain within the channel, sufficient water depth was available outside the right or east boundary of the channel to allow the tug-tow combination to safely make any maneuvers necessary to avoid the accident. So that takes away the argument that, well, we couldn't have taken evasive maneuvers because we were too close to shore, the water was too shallow, we couldn't get around them. They're saying none of that was a factor. They could easily have gone around, they could have maneuvered safely. There was nothing preventing them physically from evading and avoiding the accident. The propulsion and steering systems of the salvaged Duck W-34 were tested to the extent possible. No significant deficiencies were found in the steering system other than those that can be attributed to the damage caused by the accident. Function testing of the non-propulsion mechanical systems on board the APV revealed no defects or indications of mechanical failure that would have caused or contributed to the accident. So there's nothing wrong with the duck that would have contributed or caused the accident. None of the non-propulsion systems. The propulsion systems are a different story because they were broken down. Post-accident inspection and testing of the steering and propulsion systems of the Caribbean Sea revealed no defects. A third-party electronic service company tested the electronic and communications equipment on board the vessel and found no significant deficiencies. In post-accident statements to investigators, neither the vessel master nor the mate mentioned any problems that they detected in shipboard systems. Although investigators found an approximate 11-degree bias in the satellite compass heading information, when small vessels navigate on narrow rivers during clear visibility conditions, precise heading information, whether derived from the satellite compass, magnetic compass, or GPS, is not essential to safe navigation. So there's no problems, no mechanical problems with the tug that would have caused the accident. The NTSB therefore concludes that the following were not factors in this accident. These are the not factors in the accident. Qualifications of crew members on board the Caribbean Sea and Duck W-34 for the positions they held. Use of alcohol, illicit drugs, prescribed or over-the-counter medications by the master and mate of the Caribbean Sea or by the master and the deckhand of the Duck W-34, meteorological conditions, river conditions, waterway configurations, functioning of the mechanical, electronic, and communication systems on board the Caribbean Sea, and functioning of the non-propulsion mechanical systems on board Duck 34. So those are the not a factor in the accident areas. Let's look at the fire emergency. What was this thing that they thought may possibly have been a fire on board the Duck W-34? We'll just call it the Duck 34. We won't have the W anymore. The master and the deckhand of Duck 34 told investigators that about 10 minutes into the water portion of the accident tour, they call it the accident tour, they saw smoke entering the passenger cabin. Fearing an engine fire, the master shut down the engine. Post-accident examination of the engine compartment of the APV revealed no evidence of fire or smoke damage. The examination did, however, reveal that the pressure cap was not in place on the radiator surge tank. The cap was found in the bottom of the engine compartment. A radiator or surge tank pressure cap is a critical component in the engine cooling system. By raising the boiling point of the coolant, the pressure cap allows the coolant to operate at higher temperatures without being converted to steam, which would cause it to lose effectiveness as a heat transfer agent. So again, essentially what we mentioned a while ago, the radiator cap fell off of the Tugboat. Those of you that are familiar with radiator caps, the radiator cap basically fell off. That's essentially what we're talking about here. At atmospheric pressure, however, which would have been the case if the pressure cap was not installed, the coolant solution could easily have begun to boil at that temperature and evaporate as steam. The NTSB therefore concludes that the Duct 34 surge pressure cap was not in place at the time of the accident, and the missing pressure cap allowed the engine coolant to boil and create steam that entered the passenger compartment and prompted the master to shut down the engines because he believed that he had an onboard fire. So there we have essentially what they believe happened in relation to the Duct 34. What he thought may have been a fire or smoke was apparently actually steam from the radiator because the surge cap was not in place and it was just boiling off as steam, and the steam was going into the Tugboat. This is performance of Ride the Ducks maintenance personnel. So let's find out how the maintenance personnel. Let's find out. Okay, as we have here, where do we go here in chat? Someone just said, "Oh, here we are." No, not where'd he go? Damn it! Alan Walsh said it. You don't want to lose your radiator cap, that's for sure. We also had someone's. Oh, here's Alex Kane. The cap fell off. That's not very typical. Well, let's find out maybe how this happened. The mechanic who performed the post-trip inspection of the Duct 34 the evening before the accident told investigators that he had used the coolant level markings on the expansion tank to check the coolant level of the APV. He said that the coolant was right at the level it should have been, and that he had not removed the pressure cap from the surge tank. But Duct 34 was one of the 4 APVs that the mechanic inspected that evening, and it is possible that his recollection was faulty about which actions he had performed on which vehicle. If his recollection was correct, he simply may not have noticed if the cap had been improperly installed. The NTSB therefore concludes that the mechanic who performed post-trip inspections of Duct 34 failed to ensure that the surge tank pressure cap was securely in place before allowing the vehicle to enter passenger service. Performance of the operating crews before the accident. At the first sign of what he believed to be a fire, the Duct 34 master immediately shut down the APV's engines and anchored. But this loss of propulsion and subsequent anchoring, even occurring as it did in the center of a navigational channel, should not have led to a collision, because crew members of the APV and the tug-barge combination had opportunities after the time to take action that may have prevented the accident. The NTSB evaluated the performance of the crew members in an attempt to determine why this did not happen. The location of mate while navigating the Caribbean Sea. At the time of the accident, the Caribbean Sea was being navigated by the mate. The mate was an experienced mariner who had about 118 days of service on either the Caribbean Sea or the Falcon, as those vessels made the daily sludge barge run between the 2 wastewater facilities. Both the Caribbean Sea and Falcon were outfitted with the upper wheelhouse above the main wheelhouse that provided improved visibility. The Caribbean Sea master told investigators that before the accident trip, he had spoken with the mate about using the upper wheelhouse during the northbound voyage. The master said the mate had assured him that this was where he would be. In a post-accident interview with the Coast Guard investigators, the mate said that he was operating from the upper wheelhouse when the accident occurred. Because of the number of tourists in the area at the time of the prevalence of digital cameras, this accident was well documented photographically. A number of individuals who had been on the bulkhead at Penn's Landing at the time of the accident provided the NTSB with photographs taken just before, during, and just after the collision. At least 2 of the still photographs, including figures 3 and 4 in this report, provide fairly clear images of the upper wheelhouse of the Caribbean Sea just before and just as the barge struck the APV. Figure 11 shows enlargements from figure 3 and 4 that provide close-up views of the upper wheelhouse just before and after the accident. The enlargement from figure 3 shows the upper wheelhouse in a profile view. The door is open and the wheelhouse appears to be empty. Anyone at the helm would have been visible through the untinted windows. The enlargement from figure 4, taken just after the bow of the barge of the Resource struck the APV, shows the upper wheelhouse from almost a rear 3/4 view. A portion of the interior of the wheelhouse is visible through the open door. In this image, too, the upper wheelhouse appears to be empty. These are the pictures we saw earlier on in Brick Immortar's video, taken just before and at the time of the accident. Ain't nobody in that upper wheelhouse, like he said. He said, oh, yeah, I was in the upper wheelhouse at the time of the accident. Clearly, he wasn't. Clearly, he wasn't there. Emily G with the $10. Here's my money. We love dogglers and hope you cover the Shanna Gardner case. Sorry, this is not Maritime-ish. I have no idea who the Shanna Gardner case is. That may be the first I've heard about it. Unless I've heard about it and I just don't know it's the Shanna Gardner case. But yeah, right now we're going to be covering the Hannah Gutierrez Reed Rust shooting trial later this week, and hopefully that'll wrap up real quick because March 12th we got to start the Karen Reed. There's lots of Reeds here: Hannah Gutierrez Reed and Karen Reed. We got the Reed trials coming up. Thank you so much, Emily G, for the super chat and the support. We love the little doggles here, the little fat pig dogs. They're one of them's here. Strawberry's here. Yoda's on the sofa. Almost immediately, thank you again. I'll give you another bell just because you're Emily G. Almost immediately after the accident, based on their interview statements, the Caribbean Sea's deckhand number 1 and the engineer ran to the aft portion of the main deck. That's the back part. The engineer said that he then climbed the ladder on the aftermost bulkhead to the upper deck and went forward along the port side to notify the master. He said that when he opened the exterior door leading to a passageway between the master's stateroom and the ladder to the lower wheelhouse, he saw the mate standing in front of the master's stateroom door. So again, if he was in the upper deck house, if he was in the upper wheelhouse, he teleported down to right near the ladder to the lower wheelhouse there, in front of the master's stateroom. Great. To get to the upper wheelhouse to the master's stateroom, the mate would have had to descend 2 exterior ladders that terminated on the upper deck near the same aft ladder used by the engineer immediately after the accident. He would then have had to proceed forward along the same route as the engineer and enter the same exterior door into the passageway. But neither deckhand number 1 nor the engineer saw the mate at this time. Given the brief time that elapsed between the time of the engineer and the deckhand who were in the galley felt the engine RPM decrease and emerged from the galley onto the main deck, it is unlikely that the mate would have had time to travel from the upper wheelhouse down 2 ladders, then forward to the exterior door without being seen by the 2 crew members. The master said to the mate, after he'd alerted the master to the collision, left the master's stateroom. The master said that he got dressed and went to the upper wheelhouse where he found the mate. So by the time he got out, the mate was in the upper wheelhouse. The master said that when he arrived, he found the throttle active for operation from the upper wheelhouse. He also said that he found both the VHF radios and the radar were turned on. But there was sufficient time for the mate, after leaving the master's stateroom, to have gone to the upper wheelhouse and activated the valve to change the throttle control location from the lower to the upper wheelhouse before the master arrived. The NTSB therefore concludes that contrary to the master's instructions and contrary to his own post-accident statement, the mate of the Caribbean Sea was not navigating the vessel from the upper wheelhouse at the time of the collision. So yeah, they're saying basically he was in the lower wheelhouse. He lied about being in the upper wheelhouse. He told the master what happened. Then he ran up to the upper wheelhouse, switched the controls to the upper wheelhouse, turned on the VHF radio and the radar and all that other stuff to make it look like he'd been there the entire time. So based on the post-accident statements of the engineer and deckhand number 1, engine RPM was reduced almost immediately when the bow of the barge struck the APV, which indicates that at the moment of the impact, the mate was in a position to respond quickly with a throttle manipulation. Other than the upper wheelhouse, only 2 locations on the vessel would have permitted the mate to respond so quickly: the aft deck station and the lower wheelhouse. When the engineer and the deckhand exited the galley and went towards the stern of the tugboat, neither saw the mate near the aft deck control system. When the engineer went forward to notify the master, the mate was already standing in the master's stateroom. He could have been able to reach this position within that time frame and without being seen by other crew members only if he had been operating the vessel from the lower wheelhouse at the time of the accident. From the lower wheelhouse, the mate would have also been able to see the bow of the APV and recognize it as a Duck W vehicle. That's an interesting statement there. From the lower wheelhouse, the mate would also have been able to see the bow of the APV and recognize it as a duck vehicle. So even though he was in the lower one, he still should have seen it, as it swung to the port side of the barge after it had been struck. This could explain how the mate became aware of the collision so quickly, indicated by his timely throttle response, and how he was instantly aware of the type of vehicle that had been struck, as indicated by his statement to the master. So essentially, him seeing from the lower wheelhouse, him seeing the duck boat after the accident so quickly, that tipped them off that he was in the lower wheelhouse. Because if he was in the upper wheelhouse, he still wouldn't have been able to see really what he'd hit. So he kind of set himself up for a little bit of failure there. And dopamine octopus. Okay, who are you? You've changed. I have never got a chat from Dopamine Octopus before. You've changed your name. Who am I talking to here? Since I will never go on a duck, Captain Lorax of the SS Legal Vices can have my fare. Thank you for Maritime Mondays. It's great to listen live for a change. Well, it's great for you to be here too, Dopamine Octopus. That's a stupendous name, by the way. Never ever change it. Dopamine Octopus. I like that. All righty, let's get back into this thrilling NTSB report. Lack of attention to duty by the Caribbean seamate. Yeah, we know there was a bit of lack of attention to duty. Had the upper wheelhouse not been available, the mate could have navigated the tow combination safely from the lower wheelhouse. The lower wheelhouse was equipped with radars and radios that would have helped the mate monitor his surroundings and avoid hazards. Despite the presence of these navigation aids, however, with the limited visibility available because of the high freeboard of the barge, the mate would have needed to assign a deckhand with a radio as an additional lookout on the bow of the barge. So yeah, he could have still done it from the lower wheelhouse, but he would needed to have put someone at the front of the boat with a radio telling him what was happening at the front of the boat. But that didn't happen. In this case, the mate moved from the upper wheelhouse to the lower one without posting an additional lookout to ensure adequate visibility in the direction of travel. Based on the results of the NTSB visibility study from the lower wheelhouse, the mate's view of Duck 34 would have begun to be at least partially obstructed when the APV was still about 5,400 feet away, or 21 barge lengths away. So just not too much less than a mile, almost a mile away, he wouldn't have been able to see the duck boat. Once the barge approached within 3,500 feet or 14 barge lengths, the mate would have had no view of the anchored APV. At a barge speed of 6 knots, the mate's view of the APV would have begun to be partially obstructed about 9 minutes before the collision and would have been totally obstructed about 6 minutes before. Thus, from about the time the Duck 34 was firmly anchored at 14:33 until the collision, it was partially or completely out of view of the mate in the lower wheelhouse. By contrast, had the mate been navigating from the upper wheelhouse, the anchored APV would have been at least partially visible until it was less than 1 barge length away. So from 14 barge lengths away in the lower wheelhouse, it was completely invisible, but he still could have seen it less than 1 barge length away if he'd been in the upper wheelhouse. Evidence also indicates that the mate was not actively monitoring the radar and radios while in the lower wheelhouse. Even if the duck master did not make a Securite radio call. The Securite radio call, that's essentially where they just notify everybody, hey, we're sitting in the middle of the travel lane. We got some engine problems. Everybody look out for us. That's what a Securite radio call is, basically. Even if the duck master did not make a Securite radio call immediately when the APV was shut down and anchored, the lack of recorded transmission indicates that he did not. So they're basically saying that he, as we saw in the video, they said that they notified everybody on channel 13 that they had broken down and were anchored, but they don't think he did because nobody seems to have heard that. He and other mariners clearly radioed warning calls to the tugboat and barge about a minute before the collision. We heard that at the very, very beginning of the show, at the very, very beginning of the Brick Immortar video. They had the radio calls. Had the mate been monitoring the radios and radar even from within the lower wheelhouse, he would have been alerted to the presence of the APV and may have been able to take action to avoid the collision. Based on the mate's own post-accident statements to the Coast Guard, however, he was not aware of the presence of the anchored AP until after the barge had struck it. The NTSB attempted to determine why, on the day of the accident, a trained, experienced, and otherwise competent mariner failed to effectively carry out routine but highly crucial tasks central to his profession. No evidence indicates that the mate was fatigued, and his post-accident toxicological tests showed no signs of alcohol or illegal drugs. Personal use of cell phone and laptop computer by Caribbean Sea mate. The mate's cell phone records revealed a likely explanation for his poor judgment and inattentiveness to his duties on the day of the accident. The records show that the mate was engaged in voice communications with several family members beginning just 22 minutes after he assumed the watch and continued up to the time of the accident. The mate's cell phone records indicated 65 minutes of activity during the 135-minute period from the time the accident. He made the first call at 2022. So basically, he spent half his time on the phone after relieving the watch at 1200 hours until the time of the accident at 1437. 18 outgoing calls or incoming calls, totaling about 53 minutes, were made after 1315, while the mate was solely responsible for navigating the tugboat and barge. Even allowing for the fact that the call durations on the records are rounded up to the next minute, the mate spent from 1/3 to almost 1/2 of his time making or taking calls when he should have been attending to the safe passage of the vessel. The last call initiated before the accident is indicated by the phone records as having started at 1432 and could actually have been initiated up to 1 minute earlier, 1431:01, according to the mobile carrier. Based on the reported 6-minute duration of this call, the earliest it could have ended would have been 1436:02, actual duration 5 minutes, 1 second, rounded up to 6 minutes. This would have been about 10 seconds before the master of the APV made the first of his series of calls just before the collision. But this calculation represents the extremes. It is not likely that this call began and ended at the earliest possible times, making it likely that the mate was using his cell phone at least during the time of the radio calls from the APV master and possibly at the time of the collision itself. Moreover, he simultaneously conducted internet searches on the company laptop computer, which further distracted him from his navigational responsibility. The NTSB therefore concludes that the mate of the Caribbean Sea failed to maintain an appropriate lookout, including monitoring the radios while navigating the vessel, because he was distracted by personal use of his cell phone and the company laptop computer in dealing with a serious family medical emergency. The mate had been an employee of KC Transportation, they're the owner of the tug, since late December 2000. As early as March 2002, the company had issued a memorandum to its personnel prohibiting mariners from using personal cell telephones while on watch. This policy was reinforced with a second memorandum issued to all personnel on February 10th, 2004, by a third memorandum issued on July 17, 2006. Additionally, the company's policy prohibiting personal use of the cell phones while on watch was specifically discussed at a 2-day seminar that the mate attended in 2007 as part of his training. KC Transportation also prohibited use of company-provided laptop computers while on watch. A KC Transportation official told investigators that the mate had met with him briefly after the accident and told him about a serious medical emergency that affected the mate's child. The NTSB confirmed that such an emergency had occurred less than an hour before the mate reported for duty at 1200 hours on the day of the accident. So the accident happened like an hour before this guy's supposed to go on his job. All of the calls on the mate's cell phone were of relatively short duration and were to or from an immediate family member, which suggests that all of the calls were in regard to the medical emergency. The fact that the calls involved an emotionally troubling event that was likely evolving over a period of time increased the likelihood that the calls would distract the mate from his duties. Although such a distraction is understandable, personal concerns cannot be allowed to create risks for others. If the mariner is unable to fully carry out his responsibilities for whatever reason, his duty is to turn over those responsibilities to someone else. No one else on board the Caribbean Sea was aware of the emergency that the mate was dealing with. He had informed the master of the situation and asked for, had he informed the master of the situation and asked for relief, at least temporarily, the master likely would have acceded to the request. The company provided the NTSB with 15 incidences during a 12 to 18-month period before the accident in which crew members had been granted emergency relief from duty to attend to a family emergency or other family. But rather than seek relief, which would have been justified under the circumstances, the mate erroneously attempted to attend to his duties while dealing with the distractions presented by a serious personal issue and frequent cell phone use. use. The NTSB therefore concludes that the mate of the Caribbean Sea informed the master of the KC transportation of the family. Oh, that had he informed the master of the KC transportation management of those serious family medical emergencies, he would likely have been granted relief. And skip ahead here to the performance of the master and deckhand of the Tugboat. Got a little bit more here to read, then we'll be done. Let me check what's this over here at start. Aha. Oh, we got dopamine octopus already. Sorry, I'm just about gave you a twofer there. Is where we are. Yep. Okay. An opportunity was missed to have the Coast Guard issue an early security call on Channel 16 using the agency's high wattage VHF output capability, as well as to make the Coast Guard aware of a potentially hazardous situation. Other than the 4 VHF marine radio transmissions from the master attempting to contact the Caribbean Seas on Channel 13 and 16 when the collision was imminent, the NTSB was unable to verify that the master actually transmitted any security or other callouts on either Channel 13 or Channel 16 to inform vessel traffic in the area of the situation on board the Duck 34. Sirens outside. Anchoring in the middle of an active navigation channel placed the APV and its occupants in a vulnerable position because of the deep draft or limited maneuverability vessels that routinely use the channel. Awareness of that vulnerability and its associated risk with the APV occupants should have prompted the master to maintain the highest levels of alertness with regard to vessel traffic and to fully employ the deckhand to assist in that effort. Nevertheless, the master never specifically directed the deckhand, who in accordance with Coast Guard regulations was on board to assist the master, to serve as lookout once he had deployed the anchor. During the 8 minutes that passed between dropping the anchor and the collision, the master did not task the deckhand to perform any safety-related function, such as assisting passengers with donning life jackets in preparation for the planned tow or explaining emergency egress. Furthermore, in the event that either an onboard fire or loss of propulsion, Ride the Duck procedures called for masters to ask passengers to remain calm and don life jackets. Although this incident involved both a fire on board, as believed by the master, and a loss of propulsion by way of the master shutting down the engine, the master did not immediately direct passengers to don their life jackets, nor did he make any attempt to apprise the passengers of the situation. It may be argued that the master's first actions were rightly directed towards containing what he believed to be a fire. So, okay, great. His attention should have been focused on putting out what he thought was a fire rather than telling people what to do for safety. So they're saying, okay, that may have been right up to that point. It may be argued the master's first actions were rightly directed towards containing what he believed to be a fire. Nevertheless, his belief that there was a fire on board should have been enough to prompt him to prepare the passengers for an evacuation of the vessel. If the master felt that he needed to continue working to contain the fire, he could have directed the deckhand to have passengers take their life jackets down from their overhead storage and prepare to put them on. Only when the collision was imminent did the master direct passengers to don life jackets. Even then, not all passengers heard the master's order. As described by the passengers, the last few minutes before the collision were chaotic as passengers tried to secure life jackets from the overhead storage and put them on. Because of the delay in the master's orders, which came less than 1 minute before the collision, no passengers had time to fully put on a life jacket or evacuate the vessel before the barge struck. Some passengers were able to hang onto a life jacket as the vessel was forced underwater. Others were able to grab a floating life jacket when they surfaced. As a result of the master's combined failures to 1, notify the Coast Guard of anchoring in the channel, 2, direct the deckhand to perform safety-related functions in deploying the anchor, and 3, instructing passengers to don life jackets, the NTSB concludes that the Duck 34 master did not fully appreciate or appropriately respond to the risk of a collision that faced Duck 34 and its occupants once he had shut down the vessel's engine and anchored in the navigation channel. And personal cell phone use by the Duck 34 deckhand. We saw him do it. We saw the picture of him standing there doing that. While standing on the bow, the deckhand was the individual on board with the greatest height of eye at around 360 degree, and he had a 360-degree unobstructed field of view. He could have used this vantage point to continuously monitor the position of an approaching tug or barge combination, and at minimum kept the master informed about the progress. Instead, according to the deckhand, he only acted as lookout in the upriver direction forward, assuming that the master was covering the lookout responsibilities downriver. Additionally, cell phone records reviewed by the NTSB revealed that while the deckhand was on the bow, he transmitted 2 text messages and his phone received 2 others. The last text message that the deckhand sent was about 1 minute before he jumped into the water, just before the collision. The deckhand's use of his cell phone to send text messages diverted his attention away from what should have been his duty of maintaining a proper lookout. The NTSB therefore concludes that the Duck 34 deckhand's use of his cell phone to send text messages while he was on the bow of the vessel distracted him from effectively performing his lookout duties. A couple more things. I highlighted a couple more paragraphs somewhere down the line here. Let's see. The conclusions, the findings. Following were not factors. We talked about all those: the meteorological conditions, mechanical, electronics, qualifications, all this there. The Duck 34 surge tank pressure cap was not in place at the time of the accident. The mechanics who performed the post-trip inspection on the Duck 34 failed to ensure the surge tank pressure cap was secure. Contrary to the master's instruction, the mate of the Caribbean Sea was not navigating the vessel from the upper wheelhouse. The mate of the Caribbean Sea failed to maintain an appropriate lookout, including monitoring radios while navigating the vessel, because he was distracted by personal use of his cell phone and the company laptop. The mate of the Caribbean Sea should have been aware of his employer's prohibition of personal cell phone use. Had the mate of the Caribbean Sea informed the master of KC or KC Transportation of the serious family issue, they likely would have granted him relief. The actions of the Caribbean Sea master before and after the accident were appropriate. The Duck 34's master's initial response to shut down the engine and anchoring were appropriate and reasonable. And the Duck 34 master did not fully appreciate or appropriately respond to the risk of a collision after he shut down the engine. The Duck 34's deckhand's personal use of his cell phone to send text messages while he was on the bow distracted him from being a good lookout. And increased Coast Guard focus on an oversight of mariners' use of cell phones and other wireless electronic devices will prevent accidents and save lives. The emergency response to this accident was timely and effective. The Duck 34 master's safety briefing before the accident trip didn't adequately convey to the passengers the critical information they needed. And finally, the Ride the Ducks International written procedures for safety operational practices and emergency procedures on the water were comprehensive and exceeded requirements. However, they weren't fully implemented. So they had great safety manuals and practices, just they didn't follow them. Dopamine Octopus says, long-time listener, first-time caller. So the cause of the accident, the probable cause. The NTSB determines that the probable cause of this accident was a failure of the mate of the Caribbean Sea to maintain a proper lookout due to 1, his decision to operate the vessel from the lower wheelhouse, which was contrary to expectations and to prudent seamanship, and 2, distraction and inattentiveness as a result of his repeated personal use of his cell phone and the company laptop, while he was solely responsible for navigating the vessel. Contributing to the accident was the failure of the Ride the Ducks International maintenance personnel to ensure the Duck 34 surge tank pressure cap was securely in place before allowing the vehicle to return to passenger service, and the failure of the master to take appropriate actions after anchoring the vessel. That's the excerpts from the NTSB report that I wanted to read. So to wrap this up, I guess let's look at what the practical aftermath of this was, shall we? Real quickly here. We talked about the mate of the Duckboat. I'm sorry, the mate of the Tugboat. He pled guilty to mismanagement of a ship resulting in death, and he got a sentence of 1 year and 1 day. So he took responsibility. He expressed remorse. And the guy's wife, she pleaded for leniency from the judge. She said, "You're here to punish Matthew, but Matthew is punishing himself every day. He's so sorry, and we're so sorry. I'm begging for mercy for my husband. Our children are so little." And Devlin himself says, "I was very upset. I felt weak and helpless. I just asked her, what does that mean? You have to find out. I thought my son was going to be brain dead. I shouldn't have called him. I shouldn't have called him on the phone," says Mrs. Devlin. "I'm so sorry every day that I called him, but that's just the person that he is. He loves his kids so much, he goes into a panic." And then Matthew Devlin says, I went to the court. I want the court to know that in no way do I feel responsible for this. This is his initial. Initially, Matthew Devlin said he felt partly responsible for the accident, but backtracked under pressure from the judge. I want the court to know that in no way do I feel responsible for the deaths of these two children, he said. I look at my own children and could never imagine not having them. I'm sorry, that was a double negative. Let me read that again. I want the court to know that in no way do I not feel responsible. In no way do I not feel responsible. So what he meant to say is, I want the court to know that I do feel responsible for the deaths of the children. I look at my own children and could never imagine not having them. There isn't a day that I will ever forget your children, he said to the parents of the victims. I am, on a human level, very sad that you're here, said the judge to Devlin. I think you have personally punished yourself in many ways, but there has to be consequences for behavior. I just think that you should have stepped away. You could have stepped away. I just can't understand from your perspective turning the ship's radios down, the judge said. Everybody knew this accident was happening but you. So that's what became of the tugboat pilot. He got a year and a day. And as far as the families and the people involved, after a lot of lawsuits, a lot of legal wrangling, and a lot of time, they reached a settlement agreement. The families of the two tourists who died, they split a $15 million settlement that was paid for both by Ride the Ducks and the owners of the tugboat. So the two families, they both got about $7.5 million each, and an additional $2 million was divided among the other 18 survivors. So this is a good story where people got paid. I know getting paid, getting money doesn't bring back your children. It doesn't make your nightmares go away. But so many times when you limit liability and you have all these other issues, people don't get paid. They don't get compensated for these accidents. But this is a case where they finally, all the companies did the right thing. They reached a settlement, $7.5 million to the two families each, for a total of $15 million plus $2 million to the other 18 survivors. And that, folks, is the end of yet another Maritime Monday, the Duck 34. Like I said, we could stop doing Maritime Monday and do Duckboat Monday, because there's so many other duckboat accidents out there. You heard about a couple of them during the video. We might do one another 5-6 months down the road. What's coming up for the rest of the time? I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow yet. I haven't thought that far ahead. Wednesday, right now, we're scheduled to have the Hannah Gutierrez Reed interrogation video redux. We're going to that was one of the very first videos that I ever did as the law tuber, law racks guy, was Hannah Gutierrez Reed police interrogation videos. We'll look at those again on Wednesday. On Thursday, we should be starting the trial of Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Friday is going to be a double header. I'm going to start out 7 a.m. Eastern. 7 a.m. Eastern U.S. time and noon UK time with the F at Friday. We're going to do the F at Friday stream for 4 hours from that, for just a 4-hour window. So everybody get your drinks in, throw your money at me. That's what we do. We grift for shots. Don't wait for 5 or 6 hours and get everything up front, get everything in as quickly as possible, because we're only going to be doing it for 4 hours. We've got a panel that's shaping up right now. So far, let me see here. We got Chrissy Mayer, comedian Chrissy Mayer is going to be there. Nicholas Starro said he's going to be there. Megan Fox is going to pop in for a bit. Good Logic says there's a good chance. And there's going to be a couple of other people we're waiting to hear from, and we'll play it by ear to see but that's just the basics right now. We'll see who else shows up. So don't wait, get it in fast, because we got some heavy duty drinking to do. We got to grift for all of your money for the F at Friday, because that's what we do. We just get all the grifting out in one day. The reason we're only doing it for 4 hours is if I'm still physically able after you throw so much money at me and I get really super drunk in 4 hours. If I'm still able, then we'll stream the Friday session of the Hannah Gutierrez Reed trial. If I just can't do it and I got to take a knee, we'll do a makeup. We'll do a makeup stream on for the Hannah Gutierrez Reed trial on probably Sunday. So there we go. Let's see where we got to send you off somewhere, because I'm going to shut this thing down and go to sleep. It's 1:30 a.m. I got a busy day tomorrow. So we'll also be having, I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow yet. I'll have to think about it and decide in the morning. But whatever we do, I got a package today. I got a box from the U.S. I don't know who it's from. You'll have to open it up to find out who it's from. But I got a box from somebody somewhere in the U.S. We'll do a little unboxing tomorrow, in addition to whatever else it is we're going to talk about. So stay tuned for the unboxing. All right, who is streaming right now? Who's going on? What's going on? Let me pull up today's video live. Where are we? Live. Wait, why isn't this? Are we okay? It was all right. Okay, fine. That was just weird. It wasn't showing that we were live right now. I'm like, oh my God, we're not live. I've been talking to myself for like 2 hours. Let's see. Customization, redirect. Who is streaming now? Nick, Megan Fox, potentially criminal, legal mindset. Let's go to potentially criminal. The Michelle Troconis trial, day 23. Let's go say hi to Sean. Everybody go on over to Sean at Potentially Criminal. Say hi. Tell him Legal Vices sent you and enjoy it. So here we go. Everybody, thank you. Mods, thank you so much for being here for Maritime Monday. Chat, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your support. And whether it's just you commenting here, whether it's you giving these super chats, I'm just glad you're here, and I appreciate the memberships and all of that. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow when we're going to be talking about something. So we'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Take care. Tell Sean over at Potentially Criminal hi. Bye now.